Good. Praise the Lord for that.
Bitter contest
Yes,
as the
ma'am.
nation watches. The AP's Jackie Quinn. Former Governor Terry McAuliffe.
My dad is celebrating 42 years of pastoring this month.
Really? Oh my goodness. Let me know because I'd love to come by.
Okay.
Honey, I don't need to wait on an invitation.
Good.
Just let me know that y'all were doing something. How about that?
Okay, cool. You got it.
Yeah. I don't need an invite. My father in that way.
Voters
I will show up.
Yes, ma'am.
with a new Department of Public Safety.
42
The homicide
years?
trial of Kyle Rittenhouse.
42 years.
Statements
Oh,
today in Wisconsin.
man.
Rittenhouse is charged with
Oh, wow.
shooting 2 men dead and wounding
I
a
remember
third
that
last
Christmas
year,
week,
as
honey.
Kenosha saw violent protests.
We went over to the
show.
Oh, man. I remember that. That was 42 years
Of
ago.
the UN climate conference in
Yeah, that was
Yes, ma'am.
79. I remember that. I remember that.
Deforestation. Scientists call it a major driver of climate change. This is AP News.
I remember that. I think Dad put Johnny in the pulpit because Johnny used to fall asleep. Oh, my brother, bless his heart. He was in the pastor's chair.
Yeah.
Yes. He said, no, you can stay up for these parties. You can stay up for this, my son.
An open defiance.
Johnny was like, he'd be nodding in the pulpit, and Dad get turn on, wake up.
Conservative Justice raised questions about the law's novel structure, deputizing private citizens to sue abortion.
Then they broke curfew one night, bless their hearts. And my father, we had to ride across the state, South Carolina, because we were going. I think we were going to Hilton Head.
Its purpose
After the convention.
is to find the chink
My
in
father
the
said, I
armor.
got something for you.
Washington.
I'm Rita.
You're gonna be up today. You can sit up all night long, worry your mother. Because that was how he always got you. You worried your mother. She was up all night worried. Oh man. He made them sit up all day. Oh gosh. You can't make this stuff up. Bless his heart. But they were able to work out some real kinks at Howard, which was what my father was really, concerned about, because they were facing expulsion. Howard can be a little tough in that regard. And so that will not happen now.
Understood.
Well, black schools are very, very conservative, right?
Yes.
People don't know that. Black folks are real conservative.
Yes,
Storming the Bastille. All this, ain't nobody feeling that. I mean, like, at all. Most of our grandparents didn't want our parents out there marching. Like, what did you finish? Boy, you better get your butt in school.
I'm Dr. Andrea Russo.
1 minute.
Maybe you're waiting to talk to your doctor
right now.
But if you're having an irregular heartbeat,
so thank you so much, Cosme, and thank you, Pastor.
Or lightheadedness, don't wait. This could be a
Yes,
serious
ma'am.
condition
Oh,
like atrial fibrillation, which can make you about 5 times more likely to have a stroke. If you're having these symptoms, don't wait. Talk to a doctor by phone, online, or in person.
Brought to you by Bristol Myers Squibb and Pfizer.
You know when you order a new video game, or a golf club, or a blender, and then it arrives at
30 seconds.
Okay,
you get a little
my
thrill.
mind wrapped
Imagine
around
how much
this.
more thrilling it is when you order a new car. With Nissan at home, you can shop for the perfect ride and have
Hey, everybody. My father is he's resting very comfortably, and he has to be at any hospital in the United States. I would want in the world, actually, I'd want him to be at Howard's Hospital. Not just because I went there to school. There's nothing like it. I mean, and the people in Northwestern have been so good to us. But when people love you, it's a whole different thing.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world.
People love you, so.
Change the world, we can change the world.
Although they loved him and my mom
This
at
is the
Northwestern.
Santita Jackson Show.
We have a special connection to Howard. I went there and all of that. So, thank you, everybody.
I am breathing
Santita Jackson Show. It's election day all over the country, not in Chicago, but all over the country. So let's talk about these elections in Virginia, in New York City, in New Jersey, in Buffalo, in Ohio, on and on and on and on. We're going to be talking about that all day here. And we're going to start the show talking about protocols that you need to exercise when you go into the voting station, not just the voting booth, but in the voting station. Dr. Shanina Knighton, an infection preventionist, of course, is going to give us those details. But of course, overseeing all of that will be Dr. Deborah Furr-Holden. What should you do when you go vote today? What are the things that you need to do? Should you wear gloves? Should you not wear gloves? Should you be masked? How do you interact? Should you wipe down the voting station? I mean, how are we going to do that? And then, of course, looking at all of these crucial elections and what they will mean for Democrats and what they will mean for Republicans, but more than that, what they will mean to and for you. I'm Santita Jackson, coming to you from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio. Hey, up there in Minneapolis, St. Paul, because you're having elections too. It's just incredible. What will election 2021 mean for 2022 and 2024 and beyond? 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. I want to hear your thoughts, and please text me at that number as well. I want to hear your thoughts about the elections and what they mean. And it's Tuesday, November 2nd. Wow, 2021, everybody. In Chicago, we're going to have a high of 45 degrees, mostly sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 42 degrees, mostly sunny. And in sports, we'll have the World Series tonight. Now, Atlanta leads the series 3-1, but Houston has come barreling back. What's going to happen tonight? We will see. The Timberwolves, well, they fell to the Magic. The Magic on 15, the Timberwolves 97, the Bulls, well, they were triumphant over the Celtics. Hey, 128-114. The Senators will be playing the Wild up in Minnesota tonight, and Chicago's team 5-1 over the Senators. All right, everybody. Well, let me just put Reverend Jesse Jackson first in the headlines. He is resting comfortably. My father is resting comfortably. Thank you so much for your love, your prayers, your many, many messages. He has been at Howard University. The Howard University students have been staging a protest over poor housing conditions and other concerns. And so he flew in this weekend and he negotiated with the president, Wayne Frederick. He didn't want any of the students to be expelled. And that was something that was hovering over their heads because of their protest. They will not be expelled after a meeting that Reverend Jackson had with Dr. Frederick yesterday. And their rooms, the specific issues with their rooms will be investigated. He went over to the student center, fell, and actually cut his head. And so Howard University, which is one of the finest hospitals in the university, the Howard University Hospital, kept him overnight for observation, and they just wanted to check him out. If there's any hospital in the world where I am glad to have my father be a patient, it would be Howard University Hospital. Some of the finest doctors in the world, and they are taking good care of him. So thank you very much for all of your love, care, and concern. Yes, he's 80 years of age. Yes, he has Parkinson's. And no, he will not stop fighting for you. All right, everybody. It's election day, everybody. What's going to happen in Virginia with Terry McAuliffe and Republican Glenn Youngkin? Many people are wondering if Terry McAuliffe can pull it off. He has been the governor of Virginia before, but he is running up against that Trump tailwind, everybody. You've got the Virginia race that's testing the national environment. You've got Democrats in New Jersey. Will this governor, who's known to be now one of the most progressive governors in the United States, he'd be the first Democrat to be able to get back-to-back terms in many, many years. Will he be able to do that? This will be a test of the defund the police calls in Minneapolis today. We will see how that goes. A new mayor will ascend in New York City. Eric Adams is on track to become the second elected Black mayor in the history of that city. Other mayor races to watch: India Walton up in Buffalo, New York, a declared Democratic Socialist, someone who's very, very progressive. We're going to have John Nichols talking about that, those races with us today. In addition to that, Robert Patillo. And we're going to be talking about the voting protocols that you need to observe when you go into the voting booth today. Should you wipe it down? Should you have hand sanitizer? Should you have alcohol? Should you be wearing gloves? Should you be wearing masks? What should the judges be doing? All of that. These are questions that we will answer today. In addition to some others with Dr. Deborah Verholden and Dr. Shanina Knighton. So let's get right to it, everybody, as the world leaders are meeting about climate change, exchanging promises and deadlines. But one of the holdouts is Joe Manchin here in the United States. So we will see how that works. And many world leaders are concerned that the policies instituted by the United States today might change in another 2 years, 2.5 years. So what do you think, everybody? So West Virginia Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, whose vote is highly important in an evenly divided Senate. Is it really evenly divided? Come on, you guys, it's really 52-48. He has said that he is not ready to vote on the $1.7 trillion human infrastructure spending bill, even after being one of the sole forces behind its significant pare down. He tore it down, it tore it in half, and now he might not vote on it. What is the deal, everybody? Yesterday, Manchin said that liberal Democrats' efforts to secure his vote in exchange for their backing of the hard infrastructure bill, $1.2 trillion, were not working, and he insisted that the House vote on the infrastructure bill alone. Now, mind you, it was agreed, and he agreed to this, that we would pair these bills, that they would be voted on in tandem. Wow, talk about a bait and switch. Well, let us get some good news this morning, because it surely has been a whole lot. Mr. Stephen Thurston, let me give your father much, 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 much love. I've known your family. Whoa, my parents knew your grandparents. They helped to, your grandfather was one of my father's fathers in the ministry, helping to bring him into the ministry and ushering him through his early years as a young minister when he was in seminary. And in fact, your father inherited the mantle from his father, who had inherited it from his. You all have a preaching family. No one has lived until you've heard his father preach and until you've heard this young man preach. The teaching pastor of Salem Baptist Church, House of Hope. I'm sending much love to Pastor Stephen Thurston on the 42nd anniversary, and First Lady Joyce Thurston, one of my aunties. Love you all so much. 42 years at the helm of this great church. And I just want to thank you so much for all that you do and have done. God bless you. And all of our love. We're going to dedicate this show and the rest of this month to your parents for really being such a beacon, a wonderful beacon of light in our community. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you for honoring my people, Santita. I appreciate
I love them. I love them.
Over the years.
Love them. So what is some good news tonight? There's so much confusion out here.
Yeah.
Ooh.
The good news is that we can embrace the new and the next chapter. If we're honest, like most people, I've tried to control many aspects of my life, and this hasn't always worked out in my favor, unfortunately. Just when I thought I had it all under control, it's like life had inconveniently shown me many, many times that I was getting a little bit too cocky. You name it, I've tried to control it. From my schedule, yes, I'm type A personality, to foregoing random opportunities because my mind was made up on going in a certain direction. Now, none of these things that I've attempted to do are necessarily bad. Planning one's time leads to efficiency. Forgoing things because you're on a mission means you might be on the path to your purpose. But when you do all of these things day in and day out, all at the same time, let me just say it this way. It can get stressful. Life can get stressful, trying to be in control all the time. But I tried it anyway because I figured I might as well try to control what I could, since life was going to be random no matter what happened. It also gave me some satisfaction, almost a somewhat false sense of accomplishment, that I was shaping my own destiny. And I think that most of us listening in today fall into this way of thinking, because we all want to foresee things before they can potentially happen in order to feel safe. But ironically, when we try to control life, we end up missing out on possibilities that may have come our way if only we let go and allow life to happen. And try as we may, we can't always control life. And sometimes painful things happen that we couldn't possibly predict or prevent. And what I've learned in these situations that helped me to better cope with the unpredictability of life is that life happens for me, not to me. And that the seemingly bad or the painful experiences that have come my way actually create an opportunity for something bigger and better to take place in my life. Santita, you and I can't foresee what's coming down the road. We can only choose our attitude when we hit roadblocks along the journey, which ultimately shapes our choices. When life doesn't go to plan, we have to embrace the change and realize that our lives are comprised of chapters, and one has ended and another is about to begin. But we can't move on to the next chapter if we continuously reread the old chapter. We have to willingly accept that life goes on and that we have a chance to create something bigger and something even better. Our time on this place called Earth is limited and consistently passes at the same speed with no bias. And this means that with time, the inner turmoil you're currently dealing with is going to pass without a doubt. And last but not least, before we can move on to our next chapter, we have to accept that what's happening in the present moment is happening. It's real. It's not fake. It's actually happening. Then and only then can we proceed forward with calmness and clarity. Now, I get it. Somebody's saying, Stephen, this is hard. This is difficult. You don't know what my life situation is. And listen, I get it. I'm not suggesting that what I'm saying is going to be easy to digest, especially when you're hurting from something happening in your life. But know that our lives become a lot happier when we strive to make the most of what life gives us. I am encouraging us to embrace the change, whatever it is. Hold on to the notion that life could be creating space for you to do something different, something greater. And when I look back on my past, I realize that every loss has taught me beautiful, valuable lessons that now help me in the present. And the same is likely true for you. It's in these moments of inner turmoil that I want you to take mental notes, because they're going to help you to grow and help you for your future when dealing with whatever life throws your way. Hey, here's the good news. You made it through loss and hardship before. What makes you think you can't now? The good news is that you can. You just need to remember three things. Life happens for you and for your benefit, not against you. Number two, everything heals with enough time. And number three, it's pointless to keep resisting. Your next chapter could be even more amazing than the previous one. So go ahead, turn the page, stop going back. Let's move forward.
Amen to that. You know, it's really tough when you do that, because when we're creatures of habits, habit, shall I say, it is very, very difficult. And I know I'm that person. I like being able to put my keys here and,
Yeah.
have these papers here. And you know what? I tell you what, COVID has knocked that out the box for me, because there's nothing that is the same. And having to adjust to a new reality every day and every moment. I mean, now, whenever the phone rings or when I feel a ping on my phone, I'm like, oh gosh, what is it? What? And, but you have to keep rolling with it, because, you don't know what God has in store for you. Thank you for that.
That's right.
Thank you for that. And we're going to get more of that in his wonderful book, Mirror Moments. How can we get mirror moments, Pastor Thurston?
Head over to my website, Stephen with the PH, J Thurston, THURSTON.com.
And when are you going to have another one of your Facebook talks? Because you have those too, I'm seeing, and they're wonderful.
Yes, thank you. So those are Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time on my Facebook page, Stephen Thurston. I'm all the way up to capacity, but you can still follow the page and get the notifications when I go live.
Amen to that. Amen, amen, amen. Thank you so much, Pastor Stephen J. Thurston. You know what? It's election day, Reverend Thurston, not in Chicago, but all around the country. And we're going to have Dr. Shanina Knighton, who will be joining Dr. Deborah Holden to go through some specific protocols that we need to follow when we go into the voting booth. But yesterday we started talking, Dr. Deborah Holden, noted epidemiologist, brilliant, world-renowned epidemiologist she's the Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University's Medical School. She comes out of Johns Hopkins. We've been looking at these Thanksgiving protocols, and you were saying that now is the time, 3 weeks out, now is the moment for us to begin to, uh, well, to do what? Do we get, how close to, for example, Dr. Verholten, how close to Thanksgiving dinner should we be tested? See, because it was always strange to me that people would say, go get tested. And, within what, 72 or 48 hours, I'm like, you can see a whole lot of people. You can get COVID in 2 to 3 days. What should be the proper protocol on that when you get tested before you go into the family dinner? Because you said vaccinated is great, unvaccinated, okay, but you want to make sure that people know their COVID-19 status. So how close to
Yes.
the holiday should we get tested? And what kind of test should we take? Should it be the rapid test, the at-home test, or the antigen test? Talk to us.
This is good morning, first of all.
Much love to
This
you,
is a really great,
and especially to India.
Yes. This is a really great question. And I say this phrase a lot, and I'll clarify. It's as a function of exposure. Okay? So if you, for example, are tested on Wednesday, the day before Thanksgiving, and then you go to a party Wednesday night, what good was that test? If you have now tested negative and then gone and been out around 50 people who were all unmasked drinking. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a function of exposure. I personally don't, the tests are good for different things. There's three main kind of tests that are out, and that is what's called a PCR test or a molecular test, an antigen test, also known as a rapid test, and then there's an antibody test. The antibody test is no good for telling you about right now status. Antibody test will just simply tell you whether or not you have COVID antibodies, which will tell you if you have had COVID and recovered and or been vaccinated. So that's no bueno anymore. The rapid test or the PCR test, both of them will tell you if you have COVID. One is better for people who are very, very early in the diagnosis. The PCR test is tested for the actual molecule itself. It's tested for what's on the inside of the COVID molecule. And the antigen test is tested for a piece of the protein that's on the outside of the COVID molecule. Either one of those are fine. The advantage of the rapid test is you get your results in 15 minutes. I just went and got a rapid test. I went to an event last Thursday, and it probably had about maybe 25 people that were there. We were well spread out, but I thought if somebody here has COVID, I've been exposed, I need to know that. I need to know that right away, et cetera. And I knew everybody that was there. Everybody that was there by invitation. We had some ground rules for people that came like that. And so I went and got a rapid test on Sunday because that was about 3 days after my exposure. It was the easiest thing I've ever done. I walk in, I give them my information. There was no line. I went with one other person. We both got tested. And interestingly enough, when she gets tested, she gets a rapid test and she gets a PCR test.
I do that too.
A lot of places now will allow you to get both, right? And the PCR test, by the way, the rapid test they do from the lower part of the nose. The PCR test goes a little further up the nose.
To the brain, but so, I digress.
Yeah, I'm going to leave that one alone, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
And look, if that's a barrier for people, get the rapid test. And I'll be happy to talk in the next segment about how long after an exposure you need to get you would get a rapid test for optimal results, okay? So I got I took my test. I only got the rapid test, which is just a quick little swirl on both sides around the lower part of your nose. And then I left. I gave them my cell phone number when I checked in. And about 15 minutes later, I got a text message. I clicked on a link. That linked me to the people who manage our testing is a company called Hanu. That linked me to a Hanu site, and there was my name, my information, and my test results. 15 minutes. We hadn't even made it back home, and I had my test results.
What would you have done? No, well, let me ask you this, because you're bringing up something. If you found out on your way home that you were COVID positive, that the test said that, what would you have done?
I would have immediately, when I came home, gone into isolation. So taking myself away from everybody else. And then I would have notified the other two organizers of the event that I was at on that Thursday that I was positive. So we could tell everybody that was there that somebody at the event tested positive so that people could go and get tested. And then everybody in my house would go get tested. Probably not that same day, but we would all be, anybody in my house would officially now be in quarantine. So isolation is when you know you're positive and you got to get away from everybody. Quarantine is when you choose to not be around other people because of a possible exposure. When you're in quarantine, you're just waiting a lot of the amount of time to go get tested to make sure to find out whether or not you have COVID. So everybody in my household would need to be tested, and everybody that had been in close proximity to me would need to be notified and be tested as well.
Would you be able to go use the same restroom, or how would that work? I've got less than a minute.
It's not ideal, and unfortunately, a lot of the houses only have one bathroom.
Yeah.
And so people ultimately end up having to use the same bathroom. And for those people, they just use good cleaning protocols. When my daughter had COVID, I have my own bathroom in my room, so that wasn't a problem. Mm-hmm. She has her own. Well, her and my son share a bathroom across the hall from her room. So that became her bathroom, and my son and I shared my room, my bathroom.
That's important to know.
In an ideal world, you would not go in the room with you will use a different bathroom than the COVID positive person, just because if you have another bathroom,
sure,
it's an avoidable exposure.
Absolutely. And everybody, we're digging in the weeds because these are things that we all have to live with. That's why, on election day, we're going to bring on Dr. Shanina Knighton to talk about these protocols, Dr. Deb, because boy, when you dug in on Thanksgiving yesterday, my eyes popped. But we're 3 weeks out, everybody. We're 3 weeks out from Thanksgiving and 4 weeks from Christmas. There's time for you to get vaccinated, should you choose, and there's time for you to institute protocols and to start thinking about how you're going to conduct your holidays. Because a week after Christmas is New Year's, because people are back out. So let's talk about this on Election Day on the Santita Jackson Show. Back in just a minute. Dr. Deb, how you doing?
I'm good.
Oh, well, now, you know what? I don't want to go into this here because we're on Facebook Live right now, but I would like to, let me say hello to Linda and Andre and Linear Bob out there on the left coast. Hey. And Daryl and Laura and Carol. And thank you so much. My father he's going to be doing just great. Maybe he'll get out the hospital today, maybe not. But if he doesn't get out today, I won't be upset because at Howard University, they are making sure that he is absolutely okay. But all the preliminary tests have shown that he's really in good shape, excellent shape. But I need to speak with you today because I need to get a little information, a little bit more guidance on something that I needed to get back to you. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yep.
I need to, because I don't know how to do this. And I am coming up there Monday and Tuesday. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Just trying to get my mom to come. But we'll see, because my father will be back here hopefully by then. So, you know how that goes. Oh boy. Okay. I'm sorry, honey. I'm trying to perform a couple of tasks at one time, and it's just a lot. Okay. Okay, do we have, is that Dr. Knighton? Because I hear some other noise.
I'm trying to get her on right now, but she is not picking up her phone.
Okay. Oh, well, honey, is it so? Look, I'm just letting you know what we can hear, but it's okay.
No. You know, it's so funny because on your end, for the person on the receiving end, it's always out. It might not actually be that loud on the side of the person, but I just know because it really bothers me. If you got noise in the background, it's probably amplified for the people on the other end. Or wind. You ever had somebody on the phone and it's windy outside? It sounds.
Yeah, that's like with Dr. Reeves.
Oh. But you know what it is? People forget microphones are not like the ear, the human ear. They don't disaggregate. The human ear can bring sound forward, let some other sound recede into the background. That is not what happens with a microphone. A microphone, all sounds are equal, unless it's a very, very sophisticated, well, not just microphone, but you have to have a mixer that brings some sound forward and others back. So
Ms.
it's,
Jackson?
yes.
I've now called Dr. Knighton twice, and I'm still not getting a response.
Well, just keep
do you want me
trying
to
her.
Keep trying?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. That's all. Just keep trying. And so, it's a lot. Just trying to, oh my gosh, honey. So I'm trying to post something. And, but honey, it's just one of those things. We all
20
know
seconds.
that. Okay. Yeah. Okay, everybody, how you doing? Okay.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world.
I also got Dr. Knighton, so I'll bring her up right after this.
Okay, very good.
This is the
Thank you.
Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. It is Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. What does that mean? It means the election, the midterms have begun. 2022 is upon us, even though it's 2021. We're looking at Virginia. We're looking at New Jersey. We're looking at a new mayor in New York City. In Buffalo, New York, Democratic Socialist India Walton. We'll be talking with Robert Patillo and John Nichols about those elections in the next hour. But now we're talking about protocols. Yesterday, Dr. Deborah Verholden got things kicked off for us talking about Thanksgiving protocols. We're 3 weeks out. You need to start that plan. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So we have got to every day. We're walking through what you need to be doing so to ensure that you take the proper steps to have a safe Thanksgiving. It is possible, everybody. But today, Dr. Deborah Verholden, I know you wanted us to have Dr. Knighton on there because you know she's just a little persnickety and she frightens us all to death when we go into these regular spaces and try and figure out how to be safe. Well, now many of you are going to go into the voting booth. Many of you are going to walk into the polling stations. Many of you are going to be waiting in line. And will you be physically distanced? Will you be 6 feet apart? Maybe, maybe not. Because many of us don't want to have a fight in the line. It's just, there's a lot going on. I think that for the most part, though, people have really, really been very respectful. But how do you go vote? And when you get into the booth, do you wipe it down? Do you wear gloves? Is everybody going to be wearing a mask? Dr. Deborah Verholden, epidemiologist, Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University's School of Public Health, which is at their medical school. She comes out of Johns Hopkins, but we have an infection preventionist with us. She comes and she is with us all the time. Dr. Shanita Knighton, registered nurse, infection preventionist, clinical scholar, research clinical scholar at Case Western Reserve University. Dr. Deb, before we get to Dr. Knighton, very quickly, is it safe? I mean, can we vote safely, do you think?
100%. This issue came up last time. I actually did a series of videos for the Rainbow Push Coalition on this very issue. around how people can vote safely last year, and I came up with a really cool acronym called PPE plus C, because everybody had just got this word PPE in their head, right? So I said PPE plus C. So prepare at home, and I'll talk about what that means. Prepare at home, plan your vote, have a voting plan, and then execute that plan. And then the C is have a contingency plan. So what does prepare at home look like? Well, make sure that you're already registered to vote. Know what's on the ballot. Look up your local election, see if you can get a sample ballot if one wasn't sent to you, so that you're not dilly-dallying at the voting site. Know what's on the ballot. This is just good for people in
Make
general.
it quick,
You know how many
y'all.
people, they are going for one vote. They just going to vote on that one thing, but it's 15 other things on the ballot that they didn't even know about. And how can you really make an informed decision on the fly like that? So know what's on the ballot and get yourself knowledgeable. You shouldn't be on your phone Googling stuff in the ballot box. Because here's the other thing. When you do that, it also delays the time that others are there too.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
Right? So some places are going to have lines. There won't be lines where I am. There won't be lines. But other places will have lines. And that, people are standing outside for hours or standing inside for hours because people got there unprepared, right?
Mm-hmm.
So know the ballot. Get your own day of supplies, right? If you're where you vote, they are electronic and you have to fill anything out, just take a pen with you just to be on the safe side, right? You just minimizing exposure. That way you don't have to use a pen that other people have used and all that. So bring whatever you need the day of. Manage all your personal needs before you leave the house. Don't go there hungry, thirsty, having not voided, all of that. Take care of all of that mindfully. You ever were a kid, you would go on a road trip and your mom would say, okay, everybody use the bathroom. And you say, well, I don't have to go. Go anyway. Try, right? Make sure you manage your personal needs. Having to go to a bathroom in these public spaces is an unnecessary exposure, especially since you just left home 30 minutes earlier. I'm sure there was something you could get at home. Make sure that you dress for the weather and then wash your hands before you go. All that stuff around the, planning of your vote, make sure you're really clear on how you got to vote, where you're going to go, what's on the ballot, all of that. And then you execute that plan. I tell people, go vote, take only other voters with you. I know I loved when I went to vote to bring my kids with me and all of that because I wanted them to see me exercising, this right. And I wanted them to see that behavior modeled so that for them, of course, you go vote, right? I wouldn't recommend that now. Why? Because it creates unnecessary people that are there. It's somebody else you have to tend to, and it's also somebody else that could potentially be exposed, right? So if you go and take the kids or something like that, again, it's about planning the vote. TK and Robert, I remember last election, were joking. Robert went to the one in a kind of wealthy neighborhood, and he said they had, croissants and coffee.
Yes, absolutely.
There was nobody in line. But you go in the other communities, and there ain't no croissants, there's no coffee, there's a line, you can't go inside, like that. So if you really want to, share that with other people, leave them in the car.
Absolutely.
Leave them in the car. Let them go. Let them see you go in. Come out. Let them, take a picture with you with your sticker. I voted, all of that. But try to minimize the people that you take with you and only take other voters.
Absolutely.
And then just practice good social distancing and what I call mindful enthusiasm. Mindful enthusiasm. So yelling and all that is probably not a good idea in the midst of pandemic spread through droplets. And if you get there and anything seems off, pivot and go to your plan B. So you get to your place and it's too many people. Well, have a plan B. I always tell people that's the backup, the contingency. Have a plan B, and then go to that other place and see if theirs is any better.
Okay.
And then the last thing is, if you get there and anything is off, there's some kind of voter intimidation, or there's just way too many people, right? Like anything like that. I tell people, when in doubt, get out, which is why you got to go vote early. You need room for something to happen. I don't think it's a smart idea for people to wait until 30 minutes before the poll closes to go vote. If you can avoid, if that's all you can do because you work from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., an hour away from home, and your poll closes at 8, and that's the best you can do, fine. But go vote as early as possible.
Amen to
And
that.
a little checklist. Know your ballot, have a simple ballot, a black pen, have your cell phone. If you are in one of those places where you expect a long line, you might want to snack in a bottle of water. I always tell people, if you can avoid it, lay off the water, because that'll just increase the chances that you have to use the bathroom.
Absolutely.
Make sure you got your own PPE, and if you need it, bring a chair. If you are going to be outside or queued up somewhere and you have any kind of mobility or standing issues or whatever, you may want to bring a chair, or you may want to call ahead and see if you can get accommodations and go to the front of the line because of any kind of physical disability. And absolutely, you should vote. You can vote safely, and those are my recommendations.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Dr. Shanina Knighton, what do you do when you get into that building where they're voting? Because people are not voting outside for the most part; they're going inside of buildings, and we're voting electronically. We're not voting with paper ballots, for the most part. What do you do? Do you need to wipe it down? I mean, because that's when it gets a little close when you get inside. Walk us through voting.
Good morning. So it's interesting. I'm
Because you're
actually
voting in
out and
Ohio
about
today.
this morning. I am voting in Ohio, and
Okay.
it's the funniest thing because we have like the electronic sliders, but we still on paper ballots. Yes.
Ballots.
Yeah. So our experience is a little bit different, but the one thing that I'm going to tell you that everybody has to encounter when they go inside of the polls is that you are going to go inside of a door. You're going to come in contact with a poll worker. That poll worker is going to then take your ID to verify that you are who you are. When they verify that you are who you are, that requires them to take your ID. Your ID is plastic. 9 times out of 10, these individuals are going to have on gloves in order to be able to protect themselves. So that means that they're going to come in contact with a lot of IDs with that same pair of gloves on without changing them, which means that everybody's ID that they touch is the same thing that you touched. And so with that being said, you have to make sure that you take a small alcohol wipe and clean your card before putting it back in your wallet. And after you put it in your wallet, then make sure that you still sanitize your hands just in case there was some germs that was still left on the card that wasn't taken care of by the wipe. So that would be a recommendation. The other place as well is, even if it is electronic or paper, you have to remember that other individuals are touching the same surfaces that you are touching, and 9 times out of 10, they are not being wiped down or wiped down properly. Just as I always mention, the majority of people do not properly use disinfectants on surfaces. You see them hurry up and spray real quick and wipe. But we know that disinfectants have to sit for a contact time between 10 seconds at times all the way up to 10 minutes in order for it to be effective and kill the germs. So you have to assume that everything is going to be contaminated. So after you've done it electronically or paper, make sure that you are cleaning your hands even if you don't clean those surfaces. You have to remember that if it is at a paper kiosk thing, people are hovering over that ballot, whether they have a mask on or not. They're hovering over that ballot, which means that they're hovering over that table, and potential droplets fall on that table. Just because somebody is going to the poll don't mean that they don't have the sniffles. We are in the fall season right now, and in some places it's cold. So just remember that there are germs that can potentially be at these locations, and that hand hygiene is the most significant thing. Also, because you are going to be bending down, it is natural that some people's masks may hang down a little bit, which may like actually prompt you to touch it. I am telling you to challenge yourself and make sure that you touch your mask as less as possible until you've washed your hands and have gotten back in your car. So those are my recommendations for being able to vote safely, but absolutely the most important thing is for us to get out and vote today.
Get out and vote today. Get out and vote today, everybody. If you're in Ohio, if you are in New York, the state of New York, and, it's New York City, it's Buffalo. They will be electing mayors today. You have elections all over the country. Everybody's looking at Virginia, but you've got elections all over the place. But it is just perplexing to me. If you could sit down If you could give like a 1 minute talk on television, Dr. Knighton, what would you say to the voters? Because I can't figure out why, Dr. Deb, it's so crazy to me. I don't know why they don't have infection preventionists talking to us about how to stay safe and while we're voting today. That to me is so basic. What do you think, Mark and Lorraine and Daryl and Samantha and Jewel and Linear Bob and Shirley from Philadelphia and Eric? I mean, what do you think? I mean, Dave. I mean, I know you've got a dog in the hunt. I know you in Canada. It doesn't matter. Francis, what do you all think about having an infection preventionist talking to us about how to be safe? I mean, what would you say? What do you want to say to people? What else do you want to say to people, Dr. Knighton, about physically voting? I mean, because of course, Dr. Deb just gave us some excellent advice about even carrying a little folding chair, just in case you get in the line. And there's some people who work into the early part of the evening, and this is the only time, the evening is the only time that they will be able to vote. But these, even the I mean, I think all of the people who work at the polls, let me say this, you have my respect because it is not an easy thing to do. But if you've not been trained to even sanitize a voting booth or a voting area, one of those kiosks, I mean, and most of us have not been, Dr. Knighton, we've not been. So, I mean, is there anything you can do? Because, oftentimes when you get up to speak, in a pulpit or a rostrum, someone will come up and wipe it down. Should you do that? Will that help at all?
Absolutely, and that's actually something that I had recommended, like within my own area a while back. The thing is since a lot of protocols have dropped off in a lot of places aren't doing it anymore. So we had COVID guidelines that ended up going away, and they were ineffective as of May. So a lot of places that would typically provide sanitizers and disinfectants to make sure that things are wiped down, that is not necessarily the case anymore. The other thing is you can have guidelines and policies in place, but unless you have someone there that is doing quality control checks to ensure that individuals are doing it, that also makes it a challenging thing as well, because it may not necessarily get done. So what I would like to do just really quick is talk to our individuals that use assistive devices or that are disabled. These are individuals that may be using a cane, maybe using a walker, maybe using a wheelchair. And we know already that individuals that are disabled that use these devices are more likely to cross-contaminate themselves because they have to interact with the devices that they use to stay mobile as well as interact with their environment. My recommendation for them would be to also make sure that they're conscious about what it is that they're touching and potentially take a disinfectant wipe. If you cannot take a disinfectant wipe, then on my website, I provide like some quick tips on just how to make a quick disinfectant. You can take peroxide if you want to and make sure that you have some paper towels in the Ziploc bag to be able to use. Just make sure that you have something accessible to be able to wipe down your assistive devices and your hands, because 9 times out of 10, you may be holding on to your cane, but passing somebody an ID, then you're going to go back to holding on to that cane. The same thing with a walker. So I can continue to bring up the constant contact that these individuals may have to have with public settings and with their individual belongings. And so it is very important, unfortunately, that they sanitize even more than what the average person would. If you have a loved one that is a poll worker today, make sure that in between those glove uses, maybe for them it's in between every 40 to 50 people, they decide that they're going to go and sanitize their hands and then change out their gloves. That not only just keeps the public safe, but that keeps them safe, because as I continue to iterate, the gloves themselves can carry germs, and the germs can actually get through the gloves. The gloves are non-porous, which means that they are porous, which means that things can travel through the gloves. The main goal of the gloves is just to make sure that something that is a fluid, like a bodily fluid, doesn't get through the gloves. That's the purpose of them in healthcare. So I want to make sure that people understand that they are not going to 100% protect you. It's almost like a condom, but it's even worse than a condom because even though a condom will provide some protection, there's still that risk associated with it. It's even more with the glove because they don't make gloves to provide as much protection as even that, a condom would. So I would just want to keep that in mind when we're thinking about the use of gloves.
Everybody, please be careful as we're getting out here to vote today. Please listen to Dr. Deborah Holden and Dr. Shanina Knighton. What is your website, Dr. Knighton, so that people can go, and find out how to create, just a cleaning wipe? I mean, because that's something that most of us don't even know that we think we have to buy it, and you're saying we really don't have to.
Yes, it's preventionsaveslives.com. And the infographic that it's listed on is going to be using assistive devices. So I've dedicated an actual slide to individuals or an actual infographic to individuals that use that use walkers, that use wheelchairs, that use canes. Some people have oxygen tanks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we have individuals that use a plethora of different things. And if you can imagine with the oxygen tank and also having to wear a mask, the conundrum of trying to keep both of them up. And so I want these individuals to stay safe because, their lives matter too, and their safety matters.
Dr. Deborah Holden, we're going to see a lot of discussions about the elections today. I mean, indeed, it's election day. It's election day all over the country, everybody. We're talking about that. We're going to have John Nichols and Robert Patillo to talk about Virginia and Buffalo, New York, and New York City and New Jersey and Minneapolis. They're voting on defunding the police. How is that going to work out today? Can't wait to talk about that today and tomorrow. But Dr. Holden, who should we be hearing from today? I mean, in addition to the political pundits, because we're promoting safety. I mean, and you are, a giant in the public health space. This is a public health issue to me, voting in a pandemic, don't you think? I mean, who would you like to hear? Who should we be hearing from today so that we can ensure our own safety when we go to the polls? Because remember last year, this was like people were afraid to actually go vote. And now we don't have any of those fears. At least we're not talking about them. And you're saying that we're still in the pandemic, so we still need to take precautions.
We do, and I want to be super duper clear. I know you sort of joke us. The goal is not to instill any kind of fear into anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw this at the last election. Some people in some places really did it well. They really, really did it well. I feel like my county really did it well. I felt really good about, being at the polls and the experience that I had. But we know in some other places, bad COVID protocols and all that was another way that people were trying to suppress people's votes. And so I don't want people to be fearful. Take your, plan your vote your plan. Be prepared. Go. Be mindful when you're there. And like Dr. Knighton said, the most important thing is that people vote, and you can do it safely. So, and be on the lookout too, because if your polls aren't right, or remember how this pandemic has been handled, and what resources have been available to you, and all of these other things. Which of these elected leaders have been, pushing people away from the vaccine? Reflect. And that preparation also, so that who you're voting for when you go in. And I think all of these things should be a factor that people, sort of consider as they, think about who they're going to cast their vote for.
Yeah, I mean, and who is going to get medicine to you? Who believes in Medicare for all? I mean, let's get right to it. Because you need to have access to everybody needs to have equal access to equal high quality health care, and we do not. When you get sick with COVID, if you do, or breast cancer, or you have a baby, and on and on and on and on, it costs a lot of money. Even when you have a great insurance plan, you have to pay a lot of money, Dr. Deb. And it's just, to me, it's such a burden. What I saw at the beginning of the pandemic, people were shocked. They had sticker shock, working people, poor people, when they go to the hospital and need to be presented with these bills in the tens of thousands, if not the hundreds of thousands of dollars for treatment. What should we be on the lookout for today as we go to vote? Because we're now in the midterms. I've got 2 minutes.
I'm sorry, say that again.
What should we be looking for in terms of our health, public health? You know, what you just mentioned, looking at who's on the ballot and how their stance on your health care. I mean, why would Medicare for all or universal single payer system, uh, why would that be important now?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of the kinds of things that people are on the lookout for are the things that I think more directly affect them. But I always remind people, something might not directly affect you today, but it will directly affect your loved ones, your parents, your neighbors, your aunts and uncles, and it might affect you in years to come, right? So I think health is important. We have this notion called health in all policies. Almost every single policy in this country that we implement has some implications for health. We're talking directly about health care related bills or the health care and health aspects within these bills. So things like expanding, Medicaid coverage. We have Medicaid expansion in Flint, so everybody in the city of Flint is Medicaid eligible. Those are the kinds of things you do want to be looking for. And you also want to be looking for the health implications of the other things that people are talking about and that are also on the ballot. It's kind of obvious to me, but it's not always obvious for some people. Jurisdictions, you'll look on your ballot and you'll be voting on whether or not your city should get a loan to put up a new highway.
Absolutely.
Well, if you haven't heard about how the emissions from that new highway are going to be managed or exactly where the highway is going, is there any kind of community board involved in the decision making? Do they have a voice and a vote? You might not want to vote in favor of a new highway. Health is all over the place. So be mindful of the things that are direct, and they should align with your values. If you're in a place where your elected officials are not in favor of things like universal health care coverage for all, Medicaid expansion, money for schools. Those are the kinds of things that people should know.
Absolutely.
And that's why I say be prepared. Don't just go for that one vote because there's gonna be a lot more stuff. It's not worth it financially for cities to have an election just for one thing. There will be many other things on the ballot, and you should not be sideswiped or surprised when you get there and see them for the first time. Look that stuff up before you go and know how you're going to vote on them.
Well, my father says if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Plan your vote, everybody. Plan your vote. Plan your vote. And get out and vote today. We're going to be talking about Virginia and New York and New Jersey and Minneapolis, St. Paul. You're voting on whether or not to defund the police. What would that look like? I want you to call me, Matt, and everybody else up there, my brothers and sisters at AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show on Election Day. Back in just a minute. Thank you, ladies. Well, I needed it today. It's so funny. It's just a year ago, people were afraid to actually go out and vote. But now, this is so crazy. It is crazy.
And look, that same zeal to voting that they brought to everything else.
Yeah.
People are so fast to want to get back to restaurants and partying and hanging out and all this. I hope they bring that same zeal. I'm in a city of 100,000 people, and do you know on elections like this, we might get 1,000 people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But but remember, the original idea was not for people to vote, right? So we have to be real clear that, and so the founding fathers they didn't believe in democracy, not fully. They believed in having a constitutional republic. They didn't want a monarchy. They were clear on that. And so they put different breaks in place to stand in the way of true democracy. Democracy is something that's been aspirational for us. We've moved toward that. So, it's all of those things, but you make the point. 100,000 people, maybe 1,000 people show up, maybe. And that little minority, they're the Joe Manchins of your life. They're making
you know why? They need to change the literacy on the ballot.
if that's what they want to do. You know, because if you can't read or write, you're supposed to be able to take someone into the polling booth with you to point things out to you. Most of us don't even know what our rights are, right? We don't know.
And that's true. But our pride, like, let's be honest, if somebody couldn't read, right? If somebody really couldn't read or really understand what's going on, because I'm be honest, we didn't all seen them ballots where it say two shall thou not, and you like, am I voting for this or not? Because that's not how we talk on a regular basis. So some of that stuff just is not, it's not in regular language.
Oh, absolutely. It's written like, it's written in legalese. Look, I know my great grandmother almost didn't go vote for her grandson when he was running for president. Because that meant that she would have to go to the polling place and admit that she couldn't read or write. We had to beg her. Grandma Tibby, this is historic. This is so important. And she was furious. Quiet fury. She didn't, she was just very quiet. She was dressed. She had her purse, had her net on her hair to keep her hair in place. But she was going to sit in that car. Even though my grandmother had gotten her registered to vote, she did not want the world to know that she couldn't read or write. That was like the ultimate. It was a lot for her. But she did actually get in there and help. They helped her to sign that X. But you're right. Just a lot of us, these are things we just don't know. We don't know. But I love you ladies. I'm gonna let you all go. Oh, wait a minute. You want to say hello to Robert before you get out of here? I know somebody does. Hello, Deborah.
Hey, Robert. My favorite attorney.
Someone who drags you into.
I called Robert and upset yesterday morning. I had an issue and I called every attorney I knew. And Robert was the first one to call me back.
Oh my God.
Hey, look, you say that's when you know people, huh?
That's when you know people. I literally called one of the lead litigators on the Flint water crisis settlement. Because like most of the lawyers I know in some kind of professional way. I have a couple of friends.
I'm connecting Robert Patillo.
Are in health or they're doctors. We all went to Hopkins, right? But yeah, Attorney Patillo is the best.
Well, he's right here. Attorney Patillo, you've got your number one fan, Dr. Deborah Fur, holding on with you.
Hey, Dr. D.
Oh my gosh.
I like listening. Robert always makes me laugh and think about things in a different way.
Yeah.
I can only imagine what the dinner table conversations in his house are like.
Oh, I love it. I love it, love it, love it. But we got a lot to talk about. Going to take a deep dive into Virginia at first, and then John Nichols is going to be talking with us about these other elections. We've got so many more. I mean, many of us don't even. They're so focused on Virginia, Robert. They're not even looking at Buffalo. You have a young black woman, India Walton, a Democratic socialist, who could become the mayor. They have come after her, but that's what they do with power. And it looks like she's going to do it. So if you get out and vote, that will happen. There's just so much. But say hello to, of course, Dr. Deb, your girl, Dr. D, and Dr. Shanina Knighton, excuse me. Here we go. Dr. Knighton and say hello to Robert Patillo and Dr. D. You and Dwight are twins. Okay.
Oh. It's somehow how Dwight say it too. Dwight, who is a doctor too, by the way, it really makes me feel like I'm on the radio. He got that radio quiet fire voice.
The quiet storm.
Yeah.
That's right. It. Yeah, that's right. Don Cornelius. Yeah, that's it. I love it. Well, thank you all. But Dr. Deb, I'm going to call you just after, because I didn't realize I had this stuff, and I want to go on and put it in. But I'll call you.
Okay.
Okay. What's a good time to call you today? I'm running out of here to go see my mom.
I have
See how
So
she's doing.
I actually have meetings until 2. 2 is perfect.
Okay,
My
I'll call
time,
you.
So like 1 or later your time.
I'll
I
call
will
you
be
this
working
afternoon.
polls for the
15 seconds.
I'll call you this afternoon because I'm gonna be on the meeting for a little while, and then I'm just pushing today. Everybody, my mother's great. She's fine. I'm helping her to, I'm helping to move some furniture. Okay.
You can change the world. Change
Yes.
the world. Change the world.
Yes.
We can change the world. We can
Yes,
change the
Deborah.
world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world. I am.
Welcome to the Peter Jackson Show. It's Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. It's election day up in Minneapolis, St. Paul at AM 950 radio, and not in Chicago, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, but we're covering the elections all day here on WCPT and AM 950 radio because a lot is going to be on the line in Minneapolis, St. Paul, defund the police. In Virginia, will the Democrats or the Republicans win? Will Joe Biden be able to hold the line with Terry McAuliffe, or will President Trump, former President Trump, kind of sneak on in? What do you think in Virginia? What do you think is going to happen? Critical race theory, what role will that play in that election? What about in New York City? You have an African American, Eric Adams, who's been a very prominent member of the police department, but always was aligned with the black police and looking for the rights of the black community, who's someone who's been a Republican and a Democrat. There's just a lot going on. They have, of course, in Ohio today, my friends at the Buzz Cincinnati, so many things are going on in the United States today. And so it's election day, everybody. Get out and vote safely. If you want to hear about how to vote safely, please go to my podcast, WCPT820.com/Santita, and listen to Dr. Deborah Holden, epidemiologist and the Associate Dean of Public Health at Michigan State University School of Medicine, and Dr. Shanina Knighton from Case Western Reserve University, an infection preventionist, one of about 5,000 in the United States. They're talking about how you can physically go vote and be safe. It is possible, everybody. So please get that podcast and listen to it and pass it around, everybody. Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. I want to hear your thoughts about these elections today. What do you think is going to happen in Virginia? What do you think is going to happen in New York City? What do you think is going to happen in Ohio? What do you think is going to happen, really? Because everybody's looking at Virginia. I just want to know what your thoughts are. 773-763-9278. You can text us at that number as well. In Chicago, we're having a high of 45 degrees today. Beautiful autumn day, mostly sunny. Mostly sunny in Minneapolis, St. Paul. 42 degrees will be your high. No reason not to vote, everybody, up in Minneapolis, St. Paul, AM 950 radio. In Atlanta, well, actually, they're going back to Houston, right? Okay, Atlanta leads the series 3-2, but Atlanta will be facing off against the Astros tonight. Will they even it up? Houston has come from behind. And now you're kind of seeing how it is that they have been in 3 World Series in the last 5 years. In the NBA, the Timberwolves fell to the Magic 115, the Timberwolves 97. The Bulls were triumphant, however, over the Celtics 128-114, a convincing win. The Senators in the NHL will be playing at the Wild, and the Blackhawks, well, I have to call them Chicago because we don't want to use those pejorative terms that offend the indigenous peoples, do we? Chicago's team, 5, the Senators 1. All eyes are on Virginia. U.S. voters will head to the polls today to decide a series of races and policies that will test the national political landscape. How large will President Trump loom? How are people feeling about President Biden's performance? People are looking at elections in Virginia. Who will be the governor? Will Terry McAuliffe or Mr. Youngkin be triumphant? Who will win in Buffalo, New York? India Walton, the Democratic Socialist, or will the Democratic establishment and the Republican establishment, the corporatists, come after her? That's what they've been trying to do. What about in Minneapolis, St. Paul? Defund the police is on the ballot. What is happening in Ohio? All over the country. New Jersey, they're going to get a new governor. Maybe, maybe not. The most progressive Democratic governor at this time is in New Jersey, interestingly enough. So we've got a lot to talk about today, and I am pleased to report to all of you that Reverend Jesse Jackson is resting comfortably at the Howard University Hospital. So many of you have sent your prayers and you voiced your concerns about him. He has been at Howard University the past few days, supporting the students as they have been protesting for better living conditions and more representation on the school's board of trustees, and on and on and on and on. And what's been looming over their heads has been expulsion. So he met with the president of the university yesterday, Dr. Wayne Frederick, brilliant president, and he was able to work that out. They will not be expelled, and their room issues will be investigated, each room. He went over to the Blackburn Center. Of course, I went to Howard, so I know the campus well, and he fell. He fell and he hit his head. So they took him over to Howard University's hospital. Yes, Howard does have a hospital, and they wanted to keep him overnight, just to observe and make sure that he is okay. And so they're giving him the once over all over his body, because they do that at Howard. They will not let him leave until they are sure that he's in tip-top shape, and all indications are that he's doing quite well. So thank you for your prayers, and let's get right to this, everybody. Let's get right to this election today. What is going on? What is going to happen? I think everybody just wants to know what's going to happen in Virginia. What do they think? This was a race that Terry McAuliffe was supposed to win going away. Didn't happen. It has not happened. In fact, he is in a statistical dead heat with someone who's allied with President Trump, former President Trump, Mr. Youngkin. So what do you think about that? What does that say? And what could that say? Because at this time, President Biden is having a tough time in the polls. You know, that's just a snapshot in time. That can change at any time. But he's having a harder time with his polling than any American president since they've been doing polling. He's polling lower than any American president at this point in their presidency ever. So how will that impact Terry McAuliffe in Virginia? How will Justin Fairfax, the black lieutenant governor who was smeared early on at the beginning of his term, and really he's been absolved, but he's been sidelined politically. You have two black women who could become lieutenant governors. So Lieutenant's Governor. There's just a whole lot. Robert Patillo, Southeastern Regional Director of Rainbow Push. And of course, you host your own show on WAOK, the iconic radio station in Atlanta, every Sunday from 1 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. Why is Virginia important?
Well, first of all, I did want to send my prayers, of course, to Reverend Jackson. The way I got involved with PUSH back almost 20 years ago was I was leading a student protest at Clark Atlanta University, and I got myself expelled from college, and Reverend Jackson and Janice Mathis stepped in to get me readmitted. So the reason I'm here today is because of exactly what put Reverend Jackson in the hospital today. So, of course, we send our prayers to him for a speedy recovery, which we all know he will have because he's strong and he is a fighter. But the reason that Virginia is important is that it is a bellwether. It has been trending Democratic for the last 20 years. The population has changed dramatically from the time that Virginia was considered part of the Deep South. You had many federal employees who have come into the Washington, D.C. metro area who live in Northern Virginia, which have changed the complexion of the state politically. However, I think as we mentioned yesterday, you have some of the larger metropolitan areas, the Richmonds, the Arlingtons, Crystal City, Alexandria, so on and so forth, Charleston, where the universities are that are very progressive, and then the rest of the state turns into Mississippi very quickly. So the Youngkin faction of the state has been organizing, and this should have been a Democratic slam dunk, but Democrats made a couple of Democratic blunders, which only Democrats could make. One, you have Justin Fairfax, who would have won this race in a landslide, and they allowed him to be slandered. They allowed allegations with absolutely no basis in fact that he was exonerated of be used against him as a means to stop him from becoming the next governor. Secondarily, they nominated Terry McAuliffe, a symbol of the 90s, someone who was, I'll put it this way, that same period of time where I was at Clark Atlanta getting expelled for organizing campus workers, Terry McAuliffe was the DNC chairperson who came to speak at our university. That's how long he has been around in politics. So when you have a young, diverse, progressive base, and you're bringing in symbols of the 1990s, that's not exactly the best way to motivate young people and African Americans and Latinos to turn out and vote in massive numbers. And then also, there's an old saying from the mafia: "A fish rots from the head down." That's what Joe Biden is doing to the Democratic Party currently, because he had his terrible, no good, very bad summer, which bled into a disastrous fall thus far. He put all his eggs in the basket of the infrastructure and the Build Back Better plan, neither of which have passed thus far. And so just as we've been saying about 2022, what exactly does Terry McAuliffe have to run on from the national level? What the brand Democrat? What exactly is their messaging? Are they the Joe Manchin party? Are they the Bernie Sanders party? Are they the Christian Cinema party? No one really knows right now. The Democrats have not shown in any major way the ability to have the types of coattails needed to lift up other Democrats nationwide. And I think if you're a House Democrat who's running in a swing district, a purple district, or if you're a senator like Warnock who's going to be in a tight race with Herschel Walker here in Georgia, you have to be looking at Virginia saying, well, what can I do differently than Terry McAuliffe if I'm not going to get any help from Washington? Because it doesn't look like the progressives are budging on the social spending, the human infrastructure bill. It doesn't look like Manchin and Cinema are budging on their support for corporations and their support for the Republicans and intransigents. So if you are a Democrat who's formulating your re-election strategy or your election strategy for 2022, you're very much in a go-it-alone situation, and we're seeing nationwide the results of this as Republicans are gaining what they're very much their culture war-based campaigns. You look at what Youngkin's been running on. He's running commercials saying that forcing a white child to read Beloved corrupted him and put him in therapy. Oh no. Saying that the transgender students are assaulting people in bathrooms. That's never happened, but that's what they want to scare people with. The critical race theory is going to make your children hate white people and put them into a depression.
Well, hold on. Stay right there, because he has focused his campaign, Mr. Youngkin, who is Terry McAuliffe's opponent. He has focused his campaign on education. He said, this is about education. Can you explain that? The controversy around, of course, Nobel Prize winner, beloved the author Toni Morrison. What is this about?
This is the interesting thing that started a couple campaign cycles ago. I'll actually say probably 2016 is when it really came about. That when Republicans talk about education, it's no longer talking about students. It's no longer talking about curriculum. It's no longer talking about funding. It's this battle that they've created between parents and teachers unions. When Youngkin say he wants to focus on education, what he wants to focus on is allowing white parents to not have their children, quote unquote, indoctrinated by diversity, indoctrinated by critical race theory, indoctrinated by making them feel bad about being white. That's the great fear, and this is what they are pumping into the minds of these conservative parents. So instead of having discussions about how can we have better school books or how can we have better teachers or better after-school programs, the focus on is, quote unquote, on parents' rights, the parents' ability to control the curriculum for their student, how much input the parents have on whether or not transgender students should be able to play sports, whether or not we're going to teach about diversity and inclusion, or if we're going to continue to teach Johnny Appleseed. And so this is what they've centered the campaign around. It really is a campaign around scaring white people to the polls. And so the question is going to be, if this works, then that is going to be all that we hear for the next year. It's going to be a completely culture war based 2022 race where Republicans are holding up the mantle for as the saviors of white people, the saviors of individuals who do not want a progressive agenda, who do not want their children indoctrinated by hippie culture. It's very much a return to the 1960s Nixon versus the flower children almost when we're having these conversations. So it's a scary place in America where we're no longer even operating on the same objective set of facts. There's one thing where you had a disagreement between, let's say, George H.W. Bush and Clinton and Ross Perot over how we will tax, how we will spend, how we will fund the government, how we will build a social safety net, those sorts of things. Now we're in a situation where Democrats are saying we need to have at least 16 weeks of paid family leave after someone gives birth, and Republicans are saying these liberal socialist Marxists are trying to indoctrinate your children into hating white people. Those aren't the same conversation, and it's very difficult to unite a nation around a particular political agenda if you can't even agree what we're even arguing about and what the issues of the nation are. And this is part of what happens when you start siloing information, where everybody has their own news source, everybody has their own set of facts. For anything that I can present to you from the CDC, someone else can have a blog post from Patriot Eagle 69 somewhere that says virus makes you magnetic. And so you're not operating on the same sheet of music. It becomes difficult to have conversations, and Democrats are stuck in the place of trying to push actual policy while Republicans are in a place of pushing a culture war. And without the policy to back them up, without actually being able to put this agenda into practice and actually pass things, well, then it makes that social culture war argument a lot more powerful.
Everybody, what do you think? 773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. You can text us at that number. We're going to have John Nichols at the bottom of the hour, Robert Patillo, talking to us about even beyond Virginia, because you have a lot of elections that are up today. They're looking at defunding the police in Minneapolis, St. Paul. My brothers and sisters to the north at AM 950 radio. What impact will that have? And no doubt, I think that even if Terry McAuliffe is able to pull it out, if Terry McAuliffe, former Governor McAuliffe, is able to pull it out tonight, I still think the Republicans kind of sort of got to win, right? And I think at least it's something that you need to look at, right? I mean, or do you think I'm wrong here?
Oh, no, I agree. Just the fact that this is close is an indictment on the weakness of the Democratic Party, that coming out of
the weakness, wait a minute, of the corporatist Democratic Party, right?
Exactly. That in any other period of time, having a figure like Trump still looming over the Republican Party will basically qualify them from elections for the foreseeable future. But because the corporate Democratic Party has been unable to pass literally anything that they campaigned on in 2020, anything. I'm talking about voting rights. I'm talking about the For the People Act. I'm talking about climate change. I'm talking about criminal justice reform. They've shown no actual ability to govern despite having all of the keys to power in the nation. Because of that, that is what allows the Trumpians to metastasize. And then you throw in the national problems that we do have. We do have the issue of the supply chain. We do have the issues of inflation, consumer prices going up, gas being $4 a gallon, all those bread and butter issues that Democrats seem to have no ability to talk about, no ability to pivot on.
Corporations don't.
The biggest,
I mean, because Robert, the Republicans' populist is driving their party. Our party tried to bury. I repeat, the Republican populist is driving their party. That is President Trump, who is the most popular elected politician in the United States. The mainstream Democrats have tried to bury. I think there's a lesson there, Robert. They're being driven by their base, by their energy. And they're trying, and the Democrats, the corporate Democrats are trying to bury us.
I agree completely, and I think what we're seeing is that progressives very much right now are in a position, the Democratic Party, that the Tea Party was in around 2010, where they were the mainstream party, you know, the John Boehners at the time, the Eric Cantors, those sorts of people. They wanted to bring in the Tea Party to help bolster their numbers and win an election, but they didn't want to give them a voice. They just wanted them there kind of on the fringes to support the numbers. Then by 2012, those fringe people started running for office and winning seats. Then by 2014, they started getting into leadership positions. Then by 2016, they were the leadership, and they were President Trump actually being in office. And by 2020, they had purged the traditional Republicans from the party, the Jeff Flakes, the Corkers, the Jeff Sessions, Boehner, Cantor, Paul Ryan. Those people were literally shunned and thrown completely out of the Republican Party as a result of the takeover of the Tea Party. You don't see Jeb Bushes around. You see DeSantis around now. As a perfect example, the change in the Republican Party over the course of the last decade or so. And I think this was going to have to happen on the left side of the aisle, because quite frankly, now progressives have started winning. Now you have Cory Bushes in office. Now you have AOCs and Omars and Tlaib and others who are becoming part of the Democratic base, not just these outside liberal crazy people who are just trying to use for election time. But what happens next is now they move into leadership in the next election cycle or so. And so then by 2024, we should have a true blue progressive at the top of the ticket, and we can get rid of this fantasy that somehow Scranton, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia and the rest of them are going to come back and realize that the growth of the Democratic Party is going to be in the Sun Belt and the rest of the country. And the indictment on that is what's going on right now. The most unpopular politician in America right now is Joe Manchin, followed very closely by Joe Biden. There's recent polling showing that Donald Trump is leading Joe Biden in pretty much every state because of how badly things are going currently. And the reason they're going bad currently is that the Democratic Party is allowing Joe Manchin and Christian Sinema and Joe Biden to hold up the entirety of the agenda they voted for. And for people who say, well, why are you throwing Joe Biden in there? There's no way in hell that the senator from West Virginia is not speaking on behalf of his friend, the president. He is doing. There's no way that any other president. We saw what Donald Trump did when you had senators get out of line. He destroyed them. That's the power that a president has, so they can literally end them immediately. We haven't seen that from Joe Biden. We haven't seen Joe Biden try to sell the bill back.
Wait. The way he goes after progressives now. Hold on. Wait a minute. Because he knows how to do that.
He never said. Yeah, he's never said I defeated the He said I defeated the socialists. He hasn't said I defeated Joe Manchin or I defeated Christian Sinema. We haven't seen a whistle stop tour where he's going across the country selling the bill the way that they did with Obamacare, for example. We haven't seen him on late night television answering questions and explaining what's in the bill. We haven't seen him hosting Saturday Night Live or doing local news or local radio or sending out administration officials around the country to make sure that they are telling the plan to the American people. They very much seem like they don't want it done because they don't want it done. And so Joe Manchin and Christian Sinema are taking the slack for it, but it's very much the administration's position, which is in line with them, because if they wanted it done, they would have gotten it done. And this is what we're seeing trickling down to Terry McAuliffe, who's very much part of that same wing of the Democratic Party that Joe Biden and Joe Manchin comes from, and that's not what's going to energize the Democratic base to turn out. So when you say it's already a win for Republicans, I think it also can already be a win for progressives as we look around the country.
Absolutely.
We're going to see a lot of progressives winning nationwide. I'm hoping right here in Atlanta.
Well, no, hold on. Stay right there. I want you to just stay with me for a hot second. Stay with me. Back in just a minute. Santita Jackson Show. Nikki, you can lead into John Nichols. I'm going to bring up Jewel in a hot second. Okay? Because I want you to finish that thought. Robert?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I want you to finish that thought. Because because that's the pushback that, you kind of hear that on Keep Up Alive on Sundays. And, and I love having, this you know, being in the theater where all of these ideas can respectfully be put on the table and can be debated. But the Republicans have unleashed their populism, if you will. It's not. I mean, it's not as simple as that, but it also is. They did not. The Republican establishment tried to tamp down Donald Trump, but when they saw that they weren't successful, they went with it. Roll Tide.
Mr. Nichols is on the line.
Thank you so much, Coastmate. But they didn't do that. But the Democrats didn't do that. They always roll over the progressives. They roll over their populists, which is crazy.
Well, the issue is that Republicans, Donald Trump was the person who finally destroyed the gatekeepers. There was a point in time where the party bosses, the big wigs, will be able to go behind closed doors and quietly push him out of the race. But we saw that Donald Trump had enough money, for one, and then two, he had enough celebrity that he did not need the gatekeepers. And we're slowly starting to see those gatekeepers disappear on the Democratic side of the aisle. Now they still exist. Justin Fairfax was taken out by the gatekeepers, pushing those completely false allegations against him, and then the party not supporting. They supported Northam, the blackface guy, but they want to support Justin Fairfax and his fight. And so I think that what we're seeing is as these gatekeepers are destroyed, we're going to start seeing more and more people actually represent the needs of Americans having the ability to both finance and win elections, and that's when you start seeing, as I said, the progressives become the new Tea Party, taking over and actually executing their voice and not having to go through people like Biden and Cinnamon and Manchin in order to get anything done.
Amen to that. Beware of the centrist and moderate so-called corporatist Democrats who try and morph into populists. Just know whose politics they truly represent. John Nichols from The Nation. How you doing, John?
I am fine. How are you?
Great. I've been talking with Robert Patillo. He's the Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push.
Of course, I know Robert.
Oh, of course. And so he was
on radio with him 100 times.
Yes, he was making a point. Came on, so I wanted to do that. And I want to thank you, Jewel, for calling in. I'm sorry I couldn't get to you quicker. My father is doing so much better. I just want you to continue to keep us and keep him in your prayers. But Howard University Hospital will not let him out of there until they make sure that everything is all right. But one of the things that Parkinson's he's got an aggressive form of Parkinson's, and it is marching on in his body. One of the things that he has to do every day, he has to have speech therapy, he has to have physical therapy. He hasn't done that over the past few days, and he cannot miss a day. Everybody, he cannot miss
30 seconds.
One day, and when he misses a day, and particularly at 80. You see it. And so when he fell at Blackburn Center, he fell and hit his head, and that could have been very dangerous. We were very, very blessed. Hopefully he'll come out of this maybe using a cane or a walker, which he does not want to do. But he does need to do that now. He really, really does. As anyone who sees him, you know that he walks very, very fast, but you can't outrun Parkinson's. But what you can do is get ahead of it. You can. Hopefully he'll do that. Stay right there, everybody.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. It's election day all over the country, Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. You're having an election there today. What are you going to say about defunding the police, among other issues that are on the ballot today? What about, we're not holding elections in Chicago, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, but we are having them in New York City, in Buffalo, in New Jersey, in Virginia, in Ohio. I mean, it's all over the country. I want to hear your thoughts at 773-763-9278. 773 763-9278. You can also text me at that number. We've been talking with Robert Patillo, Southeastern Regional Director of Rainbow Push. And of course, it is Tuesday. It's the bottom of the hour. You know what time it is. It's John Nichols' time on the Santita Jackson Show. I hope you'll get his book, The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party, because that's really what we're talking about today as we look at all of these elections. And of course, he is the national affairs correspondent for The Nation magazine, our nation's preeminent progressive magazine, and they have been for a century and then some. And so, as we get to you, John Nichols, as we look at all of these elections, because we've been focused on Virginia, Robert Patillo was making a point. And we were talking about this, the fight the populists are having, because we have the populist and the corporatist. Whatever you think about Donald Trump, he represents a populist strain on the right. That's what he does. And that's why people toggle between Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. Just in 2016, I mean, they have an enormous amount of appeal to both of those audiences, which are kind of sort of one, because they are looking for economic security and the American dream to be real for them. That having been said, the populists have been unleashed in the Republican Party. Somehow or another, the corporatist Democrats continue to try to ice the populist Democrats, even though they keep winning. They're the ones who keep winning. We are the ones who keep winning all over the country. So I wanted Robert to make this point as we come to you, John Nichols, because we're seeing a Democratic socialist who could become the mayor of Buffalo. I mean, you've got Jamal, you've got Mondare, you've got Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you got Ayanna. I mean, you've got Rashida Tlaib, you got Ilhan Omar. They just keep on coming. They keep on coming, keep on coming. Robert, you were making the point on the other side of the break.
Well, the last point I wanted to make is the fact that we're seeing at the grassroots level, as you were just saying, more and more progressives winning nationwide on the state and local level. We have an election here in Atlanta today for mayor, where we have Felicia Moore, who's the city council president, who's far more progressive, and then Kasim Reed, the former mayor, who is literally the most corporate of corporate Democrats known to man. He's the person who sold black churches to the Falcons to put a stadium on top of. I don't know how much more corporate you can get, but besides him bulldozing homeless encampments.
And he's black, right?
But because, of course, he's black.
No, I just want the whole audience to know. That this ain't just color, everybody. Okay.
The corporate wing of the party knows no race, it knows no class. Is just the way that they think about things, that they are up here and the people are down here. But as we saw at the Tea Party, the people are starting to rise up and push back against those things. The things that we're even talking about now were unheard of a decade ago. You went back to the first Obama term. I'm a nerd, so I went back and watched some of the primary debates from 2008. The Democrats of 2008 are more conservative than the Republicans are today. America is being pushed in a more progressive direction. They were having, in 2008, just that recent, we were having debates about civil unions versus gay marriage. We're having debates about, the place of prayer in school and all these, arguments that they seem like they came from a bygone era. It was just a short decade ago. So the decades to come, you're going to see progressives pushing out that old guard and really becoming a new vanguard, the standard bearers of the Democratic Party. And this is the problem that McAuliffe is going to have because he's part of the old guard. This is the problem that many of these corporate Democrats are going to have because you can only lie to people so many times before they figure out that you don't actually believe the things you're saying to get elected. None of us believe that Joe Biden actually believed in the Build Back Better plan. We knew that he was just saying that to get elected, and then when the rubber hit the road, we saw exactly what happened. He put Manchin and was there to be his to take the flag on it, and he's done no work to try to get it passed. So I think that even if we don't get it done now, the wave is coming. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it's slowly bending towards justice.
And one of the things that people are not talking about, John Nichols, as we look at all these other races, you have an African-American lieutenant governor who was on the fast track to become governor. And he was smeared unfairly. And as I'm reading articles about Terry McAuliffe trying to get the black vote excited, there's no voter apathy. There's voter anger. You know, you can't smear a great chance that we have someone, a decent guy, and then say, well, you got to come on out and vote for me. No, not when you stood for the guy who was in blackface. But but you know what? And speaking of progressives, we have a lot to be hopeful about. Talk to us about India Walton. I don't think that we've heard enough about her, and we're beginning to hear, how some people how the corporate forces have come after her. But she's still been holding on. I mean, first of all, she broke through and won. So talk to us about her up in Buffalo, New York, and why her race is of such great moment.
Sure. Well, let's put things in perspective today. This is a huge day for signals about where we are headed in 2022. And that's the important thing to understand. This is not a day where the whole country will shift one way or the other. As you know, Chicago isn't voting, Milwaukee isn't voting. There's plenty of places around the country that aren't voting today. But those places that are going to give us a lot of signals for where we're headed. And obviously, we'll keep a very close eye on Virginia. I hope we'll also talk about New Jersey, an almost equally large state that has a much more, in many ways, a much more instructive election going on. But in the mayoral races around the country, the interesting thing is that our media tends to focus so much on one city, New York, that it neglects all the other cities where there are elections going on. And it's certainly good to keep an eye on New York, where they had a very crowded primary and a centrist, Eric Adams, became the nominee. But on the same day that Eric Adams came through in New York, or roughly, that St. Patrick, up in Buffalo, India Walton, a 38-year-old working-class woman, a nurse and a union organizer, who had left that work to become the head of a housing project where she worked to get people affordable housing in a working-class neighborhood that was rapidly gentrifying. This young, I will say, woman broke through in her primary with a very grassroots campaign. I mean, she was doing a lot of it herself, literally knocking on people's doors herself. And she beat a four-term incumbent mayor who had been the chairman of the state Democratic Committee, incredibly powerful guy in the primary. The establishment up there and around the state of New York was shocked. They were shocked that one of their own got beat in a primary. Their reaction to it was deeply disappointing. Instead of embracing the future, the young woman who had broken through and won the nomination as a bold champion of fundamental change. She's a democratic socialist who's deeply involved in housing issues, in honest and smart police reforms, in a host of other anti-poverty and social justice initiatives and racial justice initiatives. And instead of embracing her and saying, wow, we've got a chance to have a young, dynamic mayor who could speak to the whole country, especially on issues of housing, but on all sorts of other issues, many of them said, oh, no, we're going to try and stop it. So they dusted off the incumbent mayor who'd been beaten in the primary and had him repositioned as a write-in candidate. Now, usually write-in candidates don't go anywhere, but special interests, developers, real estate interests, as well as a lot of folks outside the city of Buffalo, including some Republicans, including even some Trump Republicans, poured money into the incumbent mayor's funds. So he's raised over $1.5 million. He's flooded the airwaves with ads, poured energy into the city. And so it's a really tight race. And even though write-ins don't usually win, there is a chance that India Walton, who, this young progressive woman, who is the Democratic nominee in an overwhelmingly Democratic city, could get beat by the insiders, by the folks that she beat in the primary. And there's been, you've seen all the usual patterns up there, dusting off, like a traffic ticket or something like that, and, trying to paint her in negative ways. And this is something that they do, it's in politics, and both parties do it, I acknowledge. But there's been a real effort to try and diminish her, to weaken her candidacy. But she has, as you say, held on, proven to be a very strong debater, proven to be a strong campaigner. She has raised a good deal of money and mounted a good campaign. I'm going to watch it closely because you never know how write-ins go. You never know, what the patterns are going to be. But and I'm going to say that India Walton, whatever happens tonight, has a future. I mean, she's just a dynamic, brilliant woman who is, I think, going to be a presence politically in Buffalo and Western New York, and perhaps beyond. She's coming, and whether she becomes mayor tonight or whatever else happens, she's going to be around and be a major factor. We see a lot of this around the country. If I can point to one other one too.
No, but I would say I do think it's important to say that she has already won. See, because this is what happened with AOC.
She won that primary.
She already won. You're seeing these progressives, these people from the ground who are running, John, and they are winning. The sad thing is that they are having to fight the party in order to win. Republicans, I will say this, they kind of go with it. They're like, I'm not feeling Trump. I don't really like him, but
if it's the worst of candidates,
okay. If this is what he's bringing in, but he's bringing in the votes. This is what happens. I saw them do it with Reverend for more than a generation. They always do that, and then we're the people are the ones who are hurting because now Joe Manchin is saying the $1.7 trillion after you cut it in half. I don't know if I'm gonna vote for it. What? So, what about these other races? Because I think we need to look beyond Virginia, and because I think that beyond Virginia there are some real opportunities for wins for progressives, and to really understand where Americans are today.
Well, I think that's exactly right, and I think that this is the dangerous game of today. We're going to have wall-to-wall Virginia, right? You turn on the cable and say, Virginia, what's happening in Virginia? Blah blah blah. What we're neglecting is the fact that while Terry McAuliffe is a centrist campaign fundraiser, right? That's what he is. And he beat 3 black candidates in the primary. Now, people divided the vote. That was a challenge. And he beat, on top of those 3 black candidates, there was a progressive white candidate running as well. And so you had all these progressives running, to the left of McAuliffe. And McAuliffe comes through and becomes a nominee. And he's run he may win. And frankly, I would say that certainly he's better than his opponent. But he's had a hard time getting energy going. Compare that to New Jersey, where Phil Murphy is the governor. And Phil Murphy came in as governor as a newcomer. People didn't have a lot of sense of him early on. He was a wealthy man who got nominated and elected in 2017. He has proven to be an incredibly progressive governor, maybe the most progressive governor in the country. He has legalized marijuana. He's expunged the records of people who had convictions. He's done massive and significant criminal justice reform. He has done a great many significant environmental initiatives. He's done a huge effort to fund the schools. His response to COVID has been aggressive and smart. He's just been a really impressive governor. And I hear this. I did a profile of him for the magazine. I hear this from progressives, union members, activists on the street, young legislators who say, this guy really listens and he responds. If he's wrong on something, he changes and gets right.
But wait, let me ask you this. Was he a reaction to Chris Christie? How did he come through?
He came after Chris Christie. He came, Chris Christie had been governor for 8 years, and Phil Murphy got elected. And I think he could have governed as a centrist Democrat, very predictable. He hasn't. He's been much more progressive. And here's the interesting story. Tonight, most people think he will win and perhaps win quite easily. So compare those two, right? You got McAuliffe, a guy who was governor, coming back, having all these troubles in Virginia, and then up in New Jersey, very similar state as regards voting patterns.
Absolutely.
You have a progressive who's going to win.
But the party kind of went with it this time, with Mr. Murphy,
Jersey,
with Governor Murphy, I'm sorry.
What I want to emphasize, it's also the policies. The policies themselves are popular. And so you get a progressive governor, he does progressive things, and he's in a good position. You have, a much more centrist figure, much more complex messaging with McAuliffe, and he's struggling. Take a lesson from those two. And then as regards looking around the country, let me also emphasize, I think we're going to get tonight a really important result out of Boston, where Michelle Wu, who is a great progressive, real hardwired, deep-rooted, young activist, city council member up there, backed by Elizabeth Warren, backed by all sorts of progressives. It looks like she's way ahead in that mayoral race. And so Boston is going to have a young, dynamic woman, very progressive, as its mayor, and I think a real rising star in Democratic politics and national politics. So as we look around the map, as we look beyond Virginia, your point of a few moments ago, we start to see a map that has a lot of really exciting and really important things going on. And I would circle back also perhaps to New York City for one final element there. I keep saying one more thing because there are so many exciting things on the ballot. Eric Adams, who is likely to be elected mayor, is a centrist, and that should be understood and taken for what it's worth. But with him in citywide races will almost certainly tonight be elected Brad Lander, who's a huge progressive, a guy who's literally led progressive local elected officials around the country, very dynamic, very exciting candidate, running with a proposal to create a public bank to take on the big banks and to really democratize finance in New York City. He's almost certainly going to get elected. And then Jumaane Williams, and he'll be city comptroller, I apologize. And then Jumaane Williams, who is the public advocate, young, brilliant, former city council member, activist, some people think may run for governor of New York. He's running for re-election as public advocate. He is a genuine progressive. And he's likely to win by a very substantial margin. So once we look beyond that top line and that simplistic way of examining the night, we start to see that there'll be progressives winning across the country, and some of them will be in major cities and even states like New Jersey, and have a chance to either initiate or carry on the sort of change that is needed. And that ought to be a part of the story tonight.
Everybody, I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763. WCPT. We are looking at defunding the police, possibly up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. We're looking at progressives who can be winning below the top line. But you have a progressive governor in New Jersey. And you're seeing, though, John, I think it's important for us to point out, the establishment in both parties are having a hard time. They're having a hard time. Let me bring up Michael. He's been holding for a while. He's from Chicago. Michael, what's on your mind, sweetie?
I'm Michael from Chicago.
Michael.
I agree in all your policies and programs 100%. I'm a very liberal person. I think the way to get success is to get more people voting. Now, I like to say that, does everybody know that some of the 17-year-old citizens can vote in primary elections in 24 states in the United States now? It's a big program, but it's kind of kept a secret. Nobody knows about it. Most people in the United States think that you got to be 18 years old to vote. You got to be 18. Well, in the general election in November, that's true. In the November general election, you got to be 18. But each state can provide its people with different age of voting if they choose to. And I'm in Illinois. Illinois has 17-year-old kids voting in the primary elections. Indiana does. Ohio, Maryland, a lot of states have it. Now, the rule is, there's a rule. When the 17-year-old kid wants to vote in the primary, he has to make his 18th birthday by the November election. He's required to become 18 by November. And if he's 18 years old by November, he could vote in the November election, the general election, and he can also vote in the corresponding primary. Now, if the 17-year-old kid is going to vote in the primary, he has to make sure he registers to vote. He registers to vote before the primary. That's important. So we've got this thing. You want me to... now, a lot of people think that, well, maybe I'm giving out wrong information.
No. You are. It's right. It's right information.
Have you heard about this thing about 17-year-old voting?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. And it's on Google. If people go to Google and want more information, they could just Google in 17-year-olds voting in the USA, and they get 30 articles about it by nonpartisan, nonprofit professional organizations that are just interested in wanting to get people to vote. They want people to vote. Now, people could vote for any primary they want. They could vote for the Democratic ticket. They could vote for the Republican ticket. They could vote for the Green ticket, the Green Party, or the Constitutional Party, or whatever. But they have to know about this to vote in it. And usually these 17-year-old kids are seniors in high school, usually. Now, 10 years ago, there was only 7 or 8 states that had 17-year-old voting. Every year or two, more and more states are added to the list. Now it's up to 24 states, and Washington, D.C. has it, Washington, D.C. So if we get all these people voting, coming out to vote, they will vote progressive. The young people, 17, 18, 19 years old, are very progressive and then in their attitudes, you know. But on principle, I believe people have a right to vote no matter how old they vote.
Well,
for.
Michael, hold that thought. I have a couple of minutes before we get out of here. And John Nichols, if you can stay with me just for about 5 minutes after we get off the air, I really want to have a couple more questions for you.
Yeah,
but to me, the information that
exactly.
he's giving us is like tailor-made for, I'd say, the Democrats, quite frankly. And it's just there's so much low-hanging fruit around here. I don't see the Democrats collecting it.
Well, actually, Ayanna Pressley has introduced a bill to lower the voting age nationally to 16. And she's actually got, I think, a majority of the Democratic caucus in the House on board for it. And of course, this has happened, by the way, in Scotland and other countries in Europe and around the world. And it's an acknowledgement that, you know, young people who are 16 and 17 years old are often as engaged or more engaged than many adults with the fundamental issues and very, very progressive. And so, yeah, this is a part of what Democrats ought to be doing and progressives ought to be doing all the time, which is thinking about how to expand the electorate, how to get more people to the polls. Because one of the fundamental realities is that there are not a lot of swing voters in America anymore. You are right that in 2016 you had progressive populists and you had conservative populists, and sometimes they intersected a little. You had some folks who were so angry, you know, they might consider voting for a Bernie Sanders or a Donald Trump. There's much less of that today. Today, what we've ended up with is once people have seen Trump's racism and xenophobia, there's very little comfort with that. You don't see people saying, "Oh, I'm a Democrat, but I'm going to vote for Trump," you know, because I'm mad at the Democrats or something like that. What you see is people staying home. And that's the fundamental challenge. And for the Democratic Party at this point, what they have to do is figure out how to, A, get people out of their houses and to go vote or vote from home, but build up that electorate so people turn out. The way you do that is by giving them policies and ideas and energy and dynamic candidates, not the boring, old, predictable stuff. And B, they do have to think about how to expand the electorate. Remember, Republicans are constantly thinking out about how to make the electorate smaller, voter suppression with gerrymandering, all sorts of efforts that make it, you know, less likely for a lot of people to vote. And then they excite their own base with, like, talk about critical race theory and all these other things to kind of get people, you know, energized on their side. But they're always trying to depress the Democratic vote.
Absolutely.
Democrats should be thinking all the time of expanding their vote.
And Democrats need to fight and work to expand their vote. The votes are there. They're there. You just see all of these young people, exciting young people who continue to win. But you gotta get on their side, Democrats. Everybody get out and vote today. Certainly, I have my political inclinations. You know what they are. That having been said, I want everybody to vote. Now I want everyone to have equal access to the vote. That really is the point. And let us, as you get into the polling booths, think of what the society really needs to be. Really let's get out of ourselves and think about the common good, everybody. Can't wait to talk about the results tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. Going to be talking with John Nichols just for a few more minutes on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Love you, everybody. Get out and vote. God bless you. The Santita Jackson Show. Okay, you can keep on talking, John.
We got some music there. Yeah.
Oh yeah, got it. Hey. There are a lot I mean, it's amazing. Matt, one of my morning stars here, he said that there were three questions on the ballot up in Minneapolis. He said to give the mayor more power, police reform, and rent control, rent caps. And he plans to vote no on giving the mayor more power, and yes on police reform, and yes on rent control caps. But it's interesting to me that, I mean, and that is big. That's in Minneapolis. That's big. You have these big ideas that are on the ballot, and number one, you have elections that are going to be happening today, but we haven't really heard the corporate media talk about that, John, and that to me is very distressing.
Oh, look, the fact of the matter is our media doesn't cover politics anymore.
What do they do?
It's a gossip. It's pretty gossip with instead of the Hollywood folks and musicians, with politicians, right? I mean, we all know Joe Manchin's name. We all know Kirsten Sinema's name, right? A little bit we know that Bernie Sanders and Pramila Jayapal are pushing on the other side, but it's so often played as personalities and, what does Manchin feel like, or why is he doing that? You know what I mean? It's all trying to take apart these so prominent figures, people who've made themselves prominent. What we don't have is a knowledge of what's, for instance, in the Build Back Better bill. If you polled the average American and said, tell me 5 things that are in that proposal, they couldn't do it. Not because they're ignorant. They're very engaged. In fact, when you ask them about specifics, they get real excited. But they just haven't been told the story. And so that's one of the reasons why there's so much challenge in advancing this bill. I'm absolutely convinced that if our media covered the Build Back Better agenda in specifics, in detail, I think Manchin and Sinema would be out front cheering for it.
Absolutely.
And I'm not kidding. Even though they're drenched in special interest money, they'd be afraid because it'd be so popular. It'd be like, something they couldn't oppose. And so and this happens all over the place. I think that we see it constantly in our politics. I mean, I don't know whether Terry McAuliffe will win or lose tonight. I think he's a better candidate than his opponent. And so put those two things on the table. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, the coverage of the Virginia primary, the Democratic primary, was all about, Terry McAuliffe, and then there's these other people running, right? If there had been genuine coverage of the fact that there were Black women with legislative experience and really dynamic visions for the state running, that there were other candidates with records and experience, it could have been a very different race, but it wasn't. And
you know what?
So
Also,
no,
because I need to put this in because this is something that is going unsaid, John, and I think it's a mistake. They've been talking about Black voter apathy. That's not true. Black people are angry about what happened with Justin Fairfax. They are. And this voting block, a chunk of them will step back and pay you back. Now, do we pay? Sure. But they're like, you know what? I've lived through really hard times before. And then the Black community also becomes suspicious when they have Black women who are put forward. Not that we don't want Black women and Black men to advance. We do. But then when you see a light like Justin Fairfax, that was really snuffed out. Hope he'll just hang in there and just will continue to fight and rebuild for another day. That is also part of what's happening in Virginia. That's why you have a moderate like Doug Wilder, the first elected Black governor in our nation's history, behind Reverend Jackson's runs in 1984 and 1988. He became lieutenant governor after he ran in 84. He got it in 85. He became governor in 89 after we had won the state twice in 84 and 88. There's that. Anytime you have him coming after Terry McAuliffe, you got a problem. And see, it's our unwillingness to address those issues, because you do have 2 Black women who can become lieutenant governor. That's great. But there's this little issue of Justin Fairfax, which ain't that little, over here, because you've got some Black talk radio hosts who are steaming hot about it, and they've been talking about it. down in Virginia, and no one's paying attention to that. That is not smart. It's not smart. And they have not been fighting to get on these black talk radio shows. That is not smart. It's not smart. Most black people in America live in the South, John. And if we're not physically present in the South, we are culturally Southern, but we are physically, more than half of us, we're remigrating. We're going back to the South. So to me, to miss that is really not smart. Miss the moment. For Democrats to miss the moment to get this energized base. I'm so glad that you wrote these pieces about Governor Murphy in New Jersey, because I didn't even know how progressive he was. I had no idea. I had no idea that he's been pivoting and just saying, you know what? It's like he's having a think. He's thinking and governing and looking at people and looking at their needs and saying, no, hey, everybody, this is what my people need. India Walton, no matter what, the fact that you sat down and talked with her and said, hey, what's going on? I mean, and thank you for reminding me. You were like, no, we need to talk about not Virginia, but all of the races. because we could see some real pickups with progressives on the ground. And and I think we've got to begin to amplify that more. And then pardon me for, almost giving you a soliloquy on it. But I just started thinking about it after you sent me these articles. I had to step back and say, whoa, I've been so focused on Virginia that I'm not looking at what's happening in Minneapolis. They've got 3 big initiatives on the ballot today that will impact how they live. Rent caps, justice in policing, right?
Yeah. And really changing the nature of governance in the city. This proposal to change the power of the mayor, that doesn't get down to the real life stuff the way that justice and policing and rent control does. But it fundamentally changes the way the city operates. It takes power away from the city council, gives it to the mayor. Really, it's something that frankly ought to be debated and considered much more seriously rather than just doing it. Because the fact is that when you change something like that, it's very hard to come back from it. Once you've created a super powerful mayor, and that relates to all the other issues. So, I mean, just as we begin to discuss it in a very quick and minor way, what we realize is these are nuanced, complex issues, and they need to be discussed in our media and in our politics in much deeper ways. But too often we don't do that. Too often we're like, oh, do we like this guy? Do we like this guy? Do we like this one? Do we like that one? It's like it's high school, and so much of the media coverage is, about, again, gossip rather than the fundamentals. And I'm not saying that, it has to be some boring bureaucratic lesson in, what are the positives and negatives of this issue or that one. No, I think the issues are actually very dynamic. I think they're very exciting if you write about them, if you report on them, if you talk about them in the right way. But too often our media doesn't. And so as a result, we're going to have a complex night tonight. We're going to see, I think, some very significant, very major victories for progressives. You may also see some setbacks. And yet, amidst all that complexity, I can tell you, I don't want to be cynical, but I'm going to tell you the absolute truth. Tomorrow morning, all that they're going to be talking about is Virginia.
Why?
But why? It's going to happen.
But why? Is it because it's? Are we having? Is it because it? Why? But I can't even come. Why?
They're late.
Why?
It's lazy and inexpensive. These big media companies that make billions of dollars, they're just like every other company. They want to cut costs, and so they reduce things to one simple test. They say, okay, something's going to happen in Virginia. It's the biggest deal in the world. They were literally saying it on cable TV last night. I did Black News Channel to talk about India Walton's race and some others, but I was watching, over on some of the others, and they're all like, oh, what's happened in Virginia, it's going to be decisive. It's such a big signal. It's going to tell us how Biden's going to do. It's going to tell us everything. But without all the nuance of the race that you've brought through this morning, without all the dynamics that are going on in other places like New Jersey, other places around the country, and I think they want this simple story that they can hype up, put a lot of graphics on, get all excited about, and then tell us, well, that's it, that settles it, that's what we know going forward. And they do this to us, and the sad part about it, Santita, is that we, the people, are smarter than that. We really are. We can handle more facts, more information, more perspective. We can take it. It's not gonna be a problem for us. It's like a muscle. The more information you've got, the more perspective you got, the better you are at it, right? The better you are at sorting things out and making the choices that need to be made. They're allowing our muscles to wither. They're making us weaker by giving us less information than frankly we need, and less perspective than we need.
Everybody, I hope you are voting today. We're talking with John Nichols, National Affairs Correspondent for The Nation. You've got to get his book, The Fight for the Soul of the Democratic Party. This is going to be a very interesting night because more races than Virginia are going on. You've got new mayors who will be elected. You've got governors. I mean, you have got initiatives that are on the ballots locally that really will profoundly impact how you live, which is why I think that we have to do more. And I'm just trying to figure out how to do it, John Nichols, to politically educate people. I'm not going to proselytize you about partisan politics, really. I have my, I'm an independent Democrat. I've been straight up with you all about that. And my issues with the party, I am straight up with you about those too. But I believe in working with everybody in order to accomplish the common good, because I think that is really what we need to be moving toward, everybody. That having been said, it's almost as if this is the way you box out progressives also, because it's the progressives who've been winning on the ground, John. I mean, AOC came from the ground. She used to tend bar, right? Jamani.
She was doing it a few months before she was elected.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, and, and I'm just looking around India, organized people in the projects. And because that's how Reverend ran for president. We ran literally with a Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket wherever we could. And when we were passing around money, and they used to, Time and Newsweek used to write stories about this disorganized, chaotic but successful campaign. They have so little money that their staffers jump in the cabs with us. That's right. So we get from, you remember, John, you were staff, going from event to event. But we were winning.
I remember.
But we were winning. Yeah, and so I'm seeing the corporate media kind of box out progressives by underreporting these elections where they're winning, which is on the ground where they're talking to people, they're winning, John.
Yeah. No, look, they are, and where they're not winning, they're getting close and building the future. And that's the other thing to understand about elections. Winning is important. It's the competition for power, and so getting power matters. Having that power to be able to do things for people matters. So there's no question of that. But by the same token, there are places where you lose and win. There are circumstances where you lose and win. Mm-hmm. Reverend didn't win in 84 or 88, and yet he transformed the Democratic Party.
Which means he won.
No question of that. Our friend, exactly, and our friend Steve Cobble points out that the rule changes that he made, that the Reverend forced through, and that his movement forced through, those rule changes in 2008 were critical to making it possible for Barack Obama to become the Democratic nominee and the President of the United States.
Absolutely.
And if you understand those dynamics, you understand that your victory may not be fully realized on election night, even win or lose. Your victory may be realized, 16, 18, 20 years later.
But wait a minute. Hold on. Stop. I have to interrupt you. You know me. He also made Doug Wilder possible, because our people who ran our campaign in 84 and 88 turned around and made him lieutenant governor in 85. and governor in 89.
Uh,
This is how you got
well,
Bernie
hold it.
Sanders in Congress. And Bernie Sanders is going to tell, he tells everybody that. The reason he went to the U.S.
Yeah.
House of Representatives and the Senate, he ran our campaign in Vermont. Paul
Yeah.
Wellstone.
And let's not stop there. Paul Wellstone,
Come on.
I was just going to name Paul. Current senators like Tammy Baldwin
Yes.
from Wisconsin, U.S. Senator, now a senior senator, grassroots activist in the Jackson campaigns in the 80s. And as long as we're naming names from right after that, those campaigns, yeah, again, because we're talking about a race for mayor of New York, David Dinkins.
Yes.
Elected in 1989.
Yes.
Right after the 88 campaign.
Because we
Come
said,
on. I mean,
we've been kicked in the teeth in the city, but we still, we won in the city. So we're coming
won
back.
the city, and-
We're
yeah,
coming back, and
exactly.
we're going to be mayor, and that is what happened. So I think that we're missing something, John, by not looking. And thank you for the correction, for the course correction. You said, wait, because I said India Walton, he's pulling her up. Okay, let me try and get inside of John's head. Because you're pulling. Let me try to.
You've been a few times, yeah.
Yeah, New Jersey. Like, let me get inside his head. And as I read, because I've been keeping up with her, but not with New Jersey, I must admit. I said, oh, wait a minute, because you're always looking in the weeds, and I appreciate that. You're like, wait, no. Don't continue to look at these bright lines. Virginia is nice, it's interesting, okay, but we have some people who are running below these top line offices, who are running and they're winning. And if they're not winning the offices, they are gaining so much traction that they have limitless political futures, and they're progressive. So what should we do with that, John? I mean, what are we supposed to do with that?
You gotta get some more stations for this show.
How about that?
There's your answer.
You're right.
And look, there are two things that you do as regards a political intermediate system that doesn't work for people in the way that it should. The first thing you do is, for those who seek to engage in that, is to run for office, to support candidates, to push on issues, to do the fundamentals, right? That matters, and to keep on doing it, win or lose, and building movements that actually prevail. Bernie Sanders will tell you this. He's finally gotten to the point where he's had more wins than losses, but the truth of the matter is that if you add up all the races that he lost, it's huge. and he's comfortable with that. He's like, I ran and lost, and in doing that, I eventually learned how to run and win without ever changing his core principles. So that's one part of it, and that's an important part. We'll see that with people like India Walton, with Michelle Wu, and others who are running and win or lose tonight. I think some will win, some may lose, but win or lose tonight, they got to go forward and keep doing it. That matters. Now, on the flip side of that is, it's how do we talk about this? And there are some of us who aren't going to run for office, but we're gonna communicate about it, right? We're gonna pay attention to it. And one of the ways that we talk about it is, on radio shows or in a magazine or places like that. And our goal is to provide the nuance that isn't there necessarily in a lot of the media. And it becomes, I always say to progressives, there's two things you got to do: support progressive candidates and support progressive media. Because the fact of the matter is, there have to be alternatives. And you know who understands that? The right-wingers understand it.
Yeah.
They support right-wing candidates, and they support right-wing media. And that right-wing media is full of falsehoods and fake news and is a mess. And I'm not, I don't want the left to recreate that. I don't want a parallel to that.
That's right.
I want progressive media to be factual and strong and smart and willing to do what you do all the time, which is, call out your friends and say, hold it, I'm not sure you're right about that. That's what I want progressive media to do. But I do want there to be progressive media. I want there to be an alternative, not just to right-wing media, but also to a mainstream media that just doesn't tell the full story.
What should we be looking for tonight? How?
I'm going to give you a quick list.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. we got to be honest with ourselves. Virginia does matter, so we've got to.
Why does it
We
matter?
got to pay attention to
Let
Virginia.
me ask you, why does it matter?
It matters because if Glenn Youngkin wins, it will be a win for the Republicans and for a guy who was backed by Trump and who ran on critical race theory and things like that. It will shake up a lot of our politics, and maybe not. Maybe it's in very bad ways, and it will convince the Republicans to do more of the exploitation of critical race theory in a very dishonest way that is rooted in literally a lot of racist and xenophobic approaches to how we talk about our history and how we talk about our present. So there's stuff there that we should pay attention to. We shouldn't turn away from it. But let's not just look at the race for governor of Virginia. Let's look at the down ballot races for lieutenant governor, for attorney general in that state. Let's also look at the legislative races where there are a lot of progressives running. And you want to see what all happens there. It's possible that McAuliffe could lose, but you could have progressive candidates still win in legislative races and the legislature end up being controlled by Democrats. It's possible you could have Democrats win down ballot races. A lot of complexity there. So let's look at the whole picture. Let's look at New Jersey, and let's be very, very clear that a more progressive candidate, a governor who's done some pretty remarkable things, not perfect, and he'll be the first to acknowledge it, is very likely to be reelected as governor of New Jersey. Let's raise that story up and be conscious that there's something else going on, not just a race in Virginia. Let's look at Boston, where Michelle Wu is very likely to become one of the most progressive and exciting young mayors in the country, somebody who could well end up as a U.S. senator, vice president, something else in the future. So let's keep an eye on that. Let's keep an eye on New York City, where Eric Adams is pretty much certain to get elected mayor, but also you're going to have some really dynamic people elected to the city council and also to the other two citywide offices, Jumaane Williams and Brad Lander. Let's keep an eye on Buffalo, where India Walton is running this courageous and exciting campaign as a Democratic socialist who beat the incumbent mayor in the primary, a housing activist who, if she's elected mayor, really will tell the whole country how to approach housing issues. Let's keep an eye on all the things that we've talked about in Minnesota, most of them really relating back to the George Floyd case and to police reform and the challenges of the city trying to find new ways to do things as regards public safety. Let's keep an eye on Seattle, where there's a very tight mayoral race in a city where gentrification is such a fundamental issue, and it relates to economic, social, and racial justice in all sorts of ways. There's a big city attorney race in Seattle as well. And then finally, let's keep our eyes open for 100 other flowers that may bloom, for stories that we haven't even been paying attention to. The young, exciting person that gets elected someplace out in the middle of the country or out in Michigan or down in Texas someplace, something we weren't even watching, and recognize those breakthrough wins. Because the fact of the matter is, today we've talked about a lot of people who've done big and exciting things. A lot of them didn't start with major races. They started getting elected to a county commission, a city council, a school board around the country. So let's keep an eye on those races and raise them up, right? Don't just follow the template that we had going in. Finally, and perhaps one that we have undercovered here, let's keep an eye in Wisconsin, where you are heard, listened to. In Mequon and Thiensville, these are suburban district outside of Milwaukee, where there is an effort to recall and vote out the school board because the right-wingers are concerned about how the teachers in that district have been teaching about racial justice. This is one of those critical race theory fights, and it is a really, really intense, brutal fight. And if the incumbent school board members win, that's a good signal. It's a good signal that we can continue to teach an honest history and really teach things that need to be taught in our schools. If they lose, that's a very, very bad signal about the success that the right is having in weaponizing education and turning it into a tool that is far more propagandistic and far more, frankly, out of touch with where our country and our future should be headed. So that's a relatively short list. We could name a lot more, but frankly, if we run through that list and keep an eye on it all, I think there's some real, we'll get some good news. We'll probably get some bad news, but we'll have a better sense of where our country's headed.
Well, I think it's important. If you have any time, I'd love to have you come on in the morning and give us, I hate to use the term post-mortem, but certainly after the
Well,
races.
some of it, yeah,
Well, some
you
of
may
it
not
might
even know
be.
some of it, to be honest. Yeah, so maybe close. But let's keep talking and keep on top of it.
Well, let me know what your time is looking like tomorrow, because I certainly, I think it's important for us to talk about it, and I think we've got to analyze it from our perspective, John. From our perspective, I don't want to
come out of it.
Yeah, because I think leaning on the analyses of corporate media, that also hems us up, which is why I faithfully read you and follow you on Twitter and all of that. And I don't follow a lot of people because it's a lot of time. But I think it's important for us with our leading lights. And a lot of people saw you on the Black News Channel and they loved it. Just wanted to let you know that.
You know, I mean, I like talking. Mark is really a great.
He's
great
brilliant
and really deep perspective. How lucky are we to have someone with that academic background and that intellectual background hosting a show?
Absolutely.
You know, that's pretty cool.
Well, he's brilliant.
I was excited for him.
He's brilliant. He's progressive. I think he's very principled. He used to be a regular on Reverend Jackson's nationally syndicated radio show. I used to bring him on. I met him through Melissa Harris Perry. Just absolutely an absolute jewel.
Yeah.
But that having been said,
He's a rising star.
people loved seeing you on there because I think it's important for us to see you on as many platforms as we can. No, I'm very serious. I mean, I love seeing you on MSNBC. I think it's great, but we need to see you everywhere because I need your perspective. I do. I need your perspective.
I appreciate that. But where I love to come on is on your show because it's such a deep, smart conversation.
Well, look, I love sitting back and learning from you when I'm not interrupting. But you say things that make me go, wait a minute, hold on. Put a pin in that. Put a carrot in that. Let me insert this. Let me insert here, because you start making me think, and that's one of the things that I like. You stir up and promote engaging conversations. You kind of shake us up, and I want to thank you for doing that, particularly in this electoral cycle, because you said, wait a minute, there are many races that we need to be looking at right now. And not just Virginia. Virginia is important. But Virginia is important to a lot of folks for their own sets of reasons. But these races ought to be important to you for yours. Jumaane Williams, I wish I could be in New York voting for him. My best friend passed away this year, and she loved Jumaane. She loved him. Candace Simmons, if I could be there for you, girl, I'd be casting a vote for you. But you know what? A lot of people are going to be voting in the way that you would have voted had you been with us. God rest her soul. My sister made her transition. My sister. Well, God bless you, John, and thank you so much. And, let me know about your time tomorrow because I think it's important for us to, like I said.
You let me know what you want to do.
Yeah, I do, because I definitely do, because I think it's important for us to engage in some analysis. Not just in some analysis. I think it's important for us to take apart what happened. Whatever we can find out tomorrow. I think it's important for us to do that because that helps us to map out a path forward. It helps us to understand 2022. I think we'll have a better sense of 2022, and I can't wait to see what what you see. That always excites me.
Yeah, we'll keep our perspective.
Well, I can't wait.
Right.
I can't wait. Blessings to you, and my love to your family.
Blessings to you. And you too. Keep that dad. Keep him healthy.
Hey, look, if he would just do what he's supposed to do, but he did do.
Gonna do what he's always gonna push the limits. That is why we love him.
Yeah.
All we can do is try and remind him that we want him to do the things he's got to do and the therapy and everything like that. But he couldn't stop himself.
Well, I don't want him to stop, but now he needs a cane or a walker. I know he doesn't want to use that, but he needs that.
Canes are cool, though. They look great. Right? You learn to handle that cane the right way, you look great.
My mother tried to tell him, but yesterday he hit his head. Yesterday he hit his head.
I know, you can't. No way.
You can't do that. You can't do that. But everybody, just so that you know, Howard University kept him overnight, and if he's going to be in any hospital in the world, Howard is the place for him to be. They're not going to let him out of there. unless they are satisfied that he is in in an excellent space. They won't let him go. I went to Howard. I used to, when I got sick, I had to go to that hospital too. But a lot of people, prominent African Americans, they're accustomed to, they're very, very protective. Um, and it's just going home. When my grandmother was making her transition, they were very, very generous with our family, and they knew after a point it was very clear our grandmother was not going to come back, and they were very compassionate with us. And you're supposed to send someone to a place where they can transition. They just let her stay, and we were able to. And my parents have a home like 2 blocks from the hospital, so my mother and I would walk over every day, which shocked them because whenever your loved one's going to the hospital or hospice, everybody, you don't turn your loved ones over to anybody. You have to be with them. And it shocked them that we were literally with her all day, every day, at all times of night. My father flew in a couple of times a week, wherever he was in the country or the world. He was coming in to see his mother-in-law. And all that's very important. But we've got to support these community hospitals, these Black hospitals, these minority serving hospitals, because they really are very attentive to communities, or to communities that don't get the attention that they need and deserve. And that's Howard's Hospital. That's Howard's Hospital, Howard University Hospital. So I'm glad that he's there. And thank you for all of your prayers and all of your love, everybody. Just keep him in your prayers and tell him he needs to do his therapy every day, and he needs that cane or that walker. He really, really does. He really does. But I will say this as we go, John. Reverend is always going to fight for you until the very end, and that is what you're seeing. That's why he was in Washington. He didn't want those children to face expulsion. And by meeting with the president of the university, they didn't. They're not going to be expelled, and their rooms are going to be.
Wouldn't let them stand alone.
He wouldn't, and they literally walked with him. They saw.
Molly Ivins wanted to write a book about. Oh, I know. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. Go on, please.
Oh no, I was just going to say Molly Ivins wanted to write a book about the civil rights movement in East Texas in the late 50s, early 60s, and her title was going to be "No One Famous Ever Came."
Oh, wow.
And it was the reality that they were very much on their own, young people trying to organize for civil rights out there. And when someone famous comes, when someone like Reverend Jackson shows up, it has such a powerful impact. It allows people who potentially are going to be marginalized, who are potentially being, pushed to the edges and won't be listened to. It allows them to step into the sunlight and be heard. Mm-hmm. The famous person who comes, the prominent person who comes, is not the star, right? What they are is the bridge. They create a bridge from one place to the other place, and they allow the real stars of the moment, the young grassroots activists, the students, to cross over that bridge into a place where they're paid attention to. And that's what Reverend did. And you know what? At the end of the day, you and I both know he can't help himself in moments like that. He sees those young students. He sees 19, 20-year-olds fighting a lonely fight, fighting a fight where they might not be paid attention to. And he sees, I think he sees a little of himself. Mm-hmm. He recognizes he was that person once upon a time.
Absolutely.
And unlike so many people who go up the ladder and achieve prominence, international fame, whatever, and they forget who they were, he has never, ever forgotten where he came from, who he was, and he is still that person. And so now at 80, when it would be so easy for him to sit back and just take the laurels, there he is out on the picket line. There he is out with the activists doing sit-ins. I want him to take care of himself every way possible. And I want him to be careful, with all of my heart. But by the same token, I can't help but be excited by who he is. Even now, at 80 years old, doing these fights.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'll say this very quickly. I was watching on C-SPAN one night. I lived in New York at the time, and they were No, in fact, I was in Washington visiting with my parents, but I lived in New York at the time. And my father had gone out, and he had to go to a dinner. And it was one of these, big Washington dinners where everybody wears a tux and da da da. Da. And Tanya Harding was the story du jour. And everyone, she'd become the butt of all of these jokes. And she was the butt of these jokes at this prominent Washington D.C. dinner. No, I was in New York. I was in New York. I lived in New York, and I remember that. I just remember being in my room. And what was interesting to me was, and you got the biggest laughs of the evening were about Tanya Harding. And so when my father got to the microphone, he said, and he just paused. He said, Tanya Harding is our child. He said, she's poor. She's full of talent. She's so poor. He said, first, she's full of talent. And clearly she has some challenges. He said, and her mother has to sew her outfits together so she can get on the ice. And a very wealthy sport. He said, but with all of that, she continues to fight. She's our child, and our child is in trouble. So we shouldn't laugh at her and pick at her and make fun of her and make her less than, because she's not less than. She's our child and she's God's child. So let's not do that to Tanya Harding today. She's ours. And you could have heard a pin drop in the room.
Oh, yeah.
And I have to tell you, in that moment, I said, Daddy, I love you. Thank you for having a real love for people. That is what President Macron said about Reverend. He said, what should we be looking at, Reverend? Because it was like all the time. It took more than an hour for them to get out to his Legion of Honor ceremony because he had pinned Reverend up. He had all these questions for Reverend. Then, of course, we had breakfast with him before we left. And he was just full. He stayed through the whole ceremony, which they say he never does. And that was like 2 hours. And he was just peppering Reverend with all of these questions. And Reverend looked at him and he said, Haiti. Every time he would ask him what was on his mind, he said, Haiti, 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 Haiti. And he looked at him quizzically and he said, Reverend Jackson, you really have a heart for the poor. And his face just was like, and my father looked at him and he said, Haiti. When you get that opportunity, when you get the mic, when you get the platform, when you get in the room with the men and women of influence and power, don't forget who sent you there. And that's one of my great lessons from my father. No, this isn't for you. We were in the car the night that we introduced our father at the convention in 1988. And we got all packed in the four-door sedan with the Secret Service. It was a car that really seated four people comfortably inside. So 7 of us were in the back seat with our parents. Don't ask me how, we were adults. But my father said this might be the last time. This is going to be the last time we're going to have two with each other before we get out here. He said, I don't think you all really understand what's going to happen tonight. You are going to introduce me. By the time we're done, we'll probably be the most prominent black family in the United States, if not the world. He said, but that's not for you. And he started naming Esther Thompson, who cleaned toilets out in Robbins, Illinois, which is a poor black suburb, but who opened up Push every Saturday. He talked about the Moore family, a working class and poor family, and now middle class family, who were the stalwarts of Operation Breadbasket and Operation Push. He talked about Hazel. He talked about Katie Pinkins, who helped raise us, and Mrs. Neal, who had already gone on to glory, our great grandmother who couldn't read or write, who was in the other car, and on and on and on. He said, this is for Fannie Lou. This is for Dr. King. This is for Cotton Reader. This is for Mrs. Boynton. He just started going through all these people. He said, this is for the child who doesn't have a daddy, like I didn't have one. This is for someone who didn't have their mama, who didn't grow up with their mamas until later, like your mama and I. Because our mothers were teen, unwed mothers who were trying to make a way and who needed to create stability before they brought us into their homes. He said, remember, this is for them. So when you go out there tonight, you're speaking for them. Remember that. I'll never forget that. Because even when I'm Mike here, my brother's like, give space to the people to talk, because this is not about you. It's not. It's not. It's not. It really is about the least of these, and this microphone is for the voiceless, for the unvoiced, for people who are ignored. Think about that today, everybody. Think about that. And you're right, Dave. Just like, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus use? Would you say a walker, a cane, or a staff? I just hope he'll use something so he can continue to walk on. But just remember that. This is never about, yes, your pearl, this is not about you. It's not. It's not. It's not. I look at how God is holding you up. Chaparral lost her son. Her son was killed, and we're still trying to figure it out. But we do know that the police watched him die. We did catch that on tape as he was on his knees begging to be taken to the hospital. They watched him die, and they shackled him. And by the time he got into the hospital, he was shackled and dying and died. But somehow or another, she has kept her strength and kept her fire, and she is fighting for other people. Her podcast on The Intercept, they have almost 2 million views. Listens, shall I say. This is really about this is really about something bigger than all of ourselves, everybody. Um, it really is. It really is. So everybody just continue to just hold on to God and think about what Jesus would do. You know, I hear you, Joyce. I hear you. I started writing this weekend, so I hear you. I hear you. Got a lot of wonderful stories. God has let me see a whole lot, and God has let me meet a lot of people, including some strawberry blonde guy, this kid, uh, almost 40 years ago. We were like, who is he coming? Where is he coming from? What does he want? I want to help Reverend run for president. This is going to be great. We're like, my parents were like, ooh, this child. we gotta take care of him. Where are your parents, boy? And we've been together all these years, and I love you, John. I thank you so much.
I love you just as much.
Love you, love you, love you.
I hope Reverend can hear some of this today and know how much we care about him.
Well, give him a call. Give him a call. I know he would love to hear from you.
That's always the best thing to do.
Mm-hmm. He'd love to hear from you. He would.
All right.
He would.
All right.
He would.
Take care, my sister.
I love you. I love you, everybody. See you tomorrow. Yes, that's right, D-Ray. He was. Shackled on a gurney. Shackled on a gurney. And by God's grace, as you said, Chaparral, she's still here, still fighting. But she's fighting for someone, not just her son, but it really goes beyond you. All of these fights go beyond us. They do. They do. And maybe because of something that happened to us, we'll fight for someone or something else. God can use anything in your life for something good in everybody else's lives. So I love you, everybody. I love you. And of course, Chaparral's podcast, if you go to Somebody, go to The Intercept. Or just go to get a podcast. It's called Somebody. It's been winning awards all over the place, and you don't want to miss it. It's a fantastic, fantastic podcast. And then the podcast of this show is on WCPT820.com/Santita. And I can't wait to be with you tomorrow. And ooh. See you tomorrow, everybody. God bless you.